Good morning, everyone. It is 8:45 a.m. Eastern Time, or 5:45 a.m. on our West Coast friends. Thank you so much for joining us, waking up early. I hope you all have your morning tea or morning coffee. We are here until about 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, so get your stuff ready. We have about 400 of you joining us today. So we'll just wait until everyone are on. People are still trickling in. So we'll be on here for a little bit. The summit will start at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. So we have a few more minutes before we begin doing that. But in the meantime, wait for our colleagues to get on the list, making sure that everyone is able to join us. And you can see our first general session speaker, Marlene, on here. All right, people are still coming in. Good. We're so excited for you guys to join us today. This is the 13th annual ERM Summit, or the 2020 ERM Vision to take on tomorrow's risk. So if this is the training that you're in the correct place. All right, so to begin our summit, I do want to go over some housekeeping items here. First and foremost, go to your control panel and look for the chat box, because we are going to play a little trivia game to make sure you know where that is so you can ask our panelists any questions you have this morning. So go ahead and click on that. I will be able to see your comments, your chats, as well as your questions. Okay, we have a lot of people saying, some people saying good morning. We will go over how to keep track of your CPEs in a little bit here, so don't worry about that. Right now, we are just making sure that you know where to go to put your comments and your questions in the chat box. Yep, good morning, everyone. I'm putting on my best voice today for you guys. Yep, so if you are saying good morning in the chat or in the questions box, you are in the right place. And that is the only place that you will be in to send in any questions and any comments. Yep, you were in the chat box, correct. All right, a lot of you are from this area, so good morning to you. Okay, so we're going to play one trivia game here. On your screen, you should see the title of the summit. All right, I'm going to advance. And this is our trivia game for today. This material girl was borderline when she lived to tell to express herself and take a bow like a prayer. Who is she? Okay, I think I might be too easy on you guys. All of you are saying the correct answer. We have some Madonna fans in here. There you go. That is the correct answer. And someone's saying Queen of Pop. Should we argue with that? No? Okay, we will not argue with that. Well, I hope you enjoyed that game. Just one question, that's all that we have for, which is perfectly fine. Before we begin, I do want to start off with a little video from AFERM. So if you are calling in or dialing in through your phone, this video will detect your speaker on your device that you are in. So it will not come through your phone if you are dialing in, but it will come through your device. So whether it's a laptop or computer. So make sure that you've unmuted your speaker when I played this video.
Hello, my name is Ken Fletcher, and I am the current president for the Association of Federal Enterprise Risk Management, or AFERM. AFERM is the only professional organization dedicated entirely to enterprise risk management across the federal government. The association is focused on education and professional development for our members and on advancing the federal government ERM profession and influencing federal government ERM practices. With 20 corporate sponsors and nearly 600 members, AFERM includes the leaders in ERM from across government and the private sector in the National Capital Region. On behalf of the Board of Directors, we would like to see you included on our membership rolls. I will now turn to Tom Brandt, AFERM's past president, and Yehuda Schmidt, chairman of our membership committee, to provide more information and details on how to join AFERM. Thank you.
Hi. I'm Tom Brandt, the Chief Risk Officer for the Internal Revenue Service and the past president of AFERM. And I appreciate this opportunity to talk with you about some of the benefits of being an AFERM member. Last year, we conducted a series of focus groups and we asked AFERM members, what is it that you value most about being part of AFERM? And a few of the points that were raised were the awareness and understanding of ERM in the federal sector that being part of AFERM provides, the chance for networking and the exchange of good practices with our colleagues in other agencies, the informal mentoring that occurs among AFERM members, and also the chance to help address some of the common challenges that we may be facing in our own programs and in our own agencies across the federal government. Those and other points were raised by members as some of the most valuable attributes of being a member of AFERM. And I hope to encourage you today, if you're not currently a member of our organization, to take that additional step and to become a member of AFERM. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Yehuda Schmidt. I'm a AFERM membership chair. I want to take the opportunity to encourage you to join and become a member of AFERM in order to immerse in the world of enterprise risk management, build your professional network, and be part of our ERM community. Some of the membership benefits are members-only website featuring technical articles and information on federal ERM, syndicated RSS news feeds from over 10 reputable industry journals, educational workshops and sessions for continued professional development, annual summit, discounted registration fee is between 16 and 25% off the ticket price, and physical and virtual community to share ideas, promote best practices, and build professional relationships. For additional information, please go to www.afirm.org/membership. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nicole Puri, and I'm the incoming president of AFERM. As I look to the next year, it will be a challenging one for AFERM. We rely on and miss our in-person interactions with our members and have had to look for ways to adapt and continue to serve all of you. While this year will have its challenges, we are committed to finding new and exciting ways to engage with you and provide the training, sharing, new ideas, and networking opportunities that we've always provided. We thank you for your support and look forward to what's in store this year.
All right. Well, thank you very much for watching that video clip. It is now my honor to introduce to you your 2020 ERM Summit Planning Committee Chair, Meredith Stein. Hi, Meredith. How are you?
Good morning. Good morning, and welcome everyone to the 13th Annual AFERM Summit. We are very excited to bring this year's summit to you for the first time in a 100% virtual environment. My name is Meredith Stein, and I'm the AFERM Chair of the Summit Planning Committee. I also lead the Risk Management Program for the National Institutes of Health. I'm happy to see familiar faces in the webinar window. It's great to be with everyone. I can visualize walking into the Ronald Reagan building and getting a seat in the large amphitheater, smiling to another attendee that I haven't seen in a year, and catching up on a coffee break, making plans to meet up for lunch to hear their ERM journey. Can you picture it? We have a great program for you today. I hope you take advantage of the insights that will be shared from our knowledgeable speakers. The AFERM Board of Directors was confident that we can make today happen in an all-virtual environment. Together, the AFERM Board, the Summit Planning Committee, and the terrific team at AGA have made sure we did not pause on our learning and our journey of ERM. The Summit Planning Committees have been hard at work these last 7 months making today's event possible. I'd like to give a special thanks to the team at AGA who has helped AFERM tremendously in event planning and coordination. I'm also grateful for the professional team of 8 volunteers who each led a subcommittee to help AFERM plan this year's summit. Bobby Joe Pankage, Kate Silvis, Yasika Ramanan, Mike Batlog, Danelle Reese, Rich Gallagher, Suzanne Auerbach, and Cynthia Bao. Volunteering for AFERM is a very rewarding experience, and I encourage you to each consider serving a role. The AFERM board has been a very positive and strong support system for the Summit Planning Committee. I want to thank Marianne Ross for her constant support and facilitation to help me plan this summit as my co-chair, while we also balance our work and family life. Thank you to the 31 speakers and moderators for creating this amazing lineup for our audience. We have over 400 registrants from the public and private sector who are virtually present for today's event. I appreciate your dedication to our ERM community. Welcome all. A few housekeeping items to remember as we move through each hour of the agenda. First, attendees at today's event are eligible for 5 CPE credits in compliance with NASBA guidelines. Throughout each session, you'll see a red colored letter on the upper left part of the slide. As you see the slide, please write down the letter in your notes. For example, on this sample slide, the letter Z in the upper left corner in the red box is the CPE tracking letter that you would write down. If you're only participating by phone, we cannot announce the letters. In your notes, please make sure you identify the session number that goes with the CPE letters you're writing down. At the end of the summit, you'll receive an email with a survey from the AGA National Office. In the survey, you'll be asked to enter the letters for each session. So it's important that during each session, you write down in your notes the CPE letters that you see. A word of caution, please do not announce the letters to fellow attendees in the chat box, as it's against NASBA policy, and you will be ineligible to earn CPE credits for this webinar. All participants must attend the entire session to receive CPE credits. Partial credits will not be issued. For those certified project managers, listen up. You can earn 5 PDUs for this event because our partner AGA is a registered education provider through the Project Management Institute. Within 2 weeks, you'll receive an email from the AGA National Office stating that your CPE certificate is ready to be downloaded. Here's another important point that's frequently asked at these types of events. You will be able to access the slide presentations from the AFERM website. I'll say it again. You will be able to access the slide presentations from the AFERM website. There are already a few slide decks already posted. Check them out. We are very pleased to recognize and offer a special thanks to our sponsors, all of whom are listed on the screen. We thank them for their generous support for this event. Be sure to visit the Virtual Solutions Hall to learn more about our sponsor service offerings, and you can also chat with them. You do not need to leave this webinar meeting room. We'll be in this room from now until 12:45. After this morning's general sessions, we'll take a short break so you can grab lunch. At 1 p.m., you'll join your meeting room by clicking on the title of the breakout session you wish to attend directly from the AFERM online agenda. You can see the GoToMeeting links directly on the agenda right now. Today is your opportunity to learn from others and share your experiences and hear from colleagues from across the public and private sector. So let's get started. I'll turn the floor over to the wonderful Mr. Ken Fletcher, the current AFERM president. Ken, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Meredith. Certainly the journey to today's virtual summit has been unlike what we have experienced in past years. And I'd like to start by thanking the many volunteers who helped pull together today's event, as well as to AGA for their wonderful support. I want to extend a special thanks to Meredith Stein and Marianne Roth, who served as the Summit Planning Committee chairs and co-chair. Thank you so much for your leadership and your ability to adapt to changing circumstances over the last year. As a result of their collective efforts, I can welcome you to the 13th annual AFERM Summit and thank you for joining us for AFERM's first virtual summit. Many of you know that we unfortunately lost a valued and respected member of the ERM community a few weeks ago. Before I continue with my opening remarks, I want to take a moment to remember Marcus Howard, who died suddenly on 22nd of August. Marcus served as the Director for ERM and Internal Controls at the U.S. Agency for International Development, and I had the pleasure of supporting Marcus and his team for the last year. Marcus was a passionate advocate for enterprise risk management and a proud supporter of AFERM. Marcus will be missed by all of us who knew him, and I ask that you please keep Marcus and his family in your prayers. It has been my privilege to serve as the AFERM board president over the last year. Thanks to the board members, our wonderful corporate sponsors, and the many talented volunteers serving on our committees and in various other ways, AFERM continues to advance the practice of ERM in the public sector. I'd also like to acknowledge our outgoing Paola Ajuma, who leave the board next month. Thank you both for your dedication and the many contributions you made to AFERM and to the support for our members over the last 3 years. I think it's safe to say that 2020 is pretty dramatically different than any year we have previously experienced. COVID-19 has disrupted business as usual, caused significant economic upheaval, and required all of us and good portions of society to endure extended stay-at-home periods and other restrictions on our normal activities. The stress on our work routines and our families is ongoing and continues to demand flexibility, adaptability, and resilience from all of us in our organizations. Although we didn't anticipate today's realities when the board settled on the theme for this year's summit, creating a clear 2020 vision to take on tomorrow's risks, that topic could not be more relevant to AFERM, our members, and our sponsors. As a result of the pandemic, the internal and external contact in which our organizations are now operating is quite different than it was a year ago. And how agencies understand and respond to those risks in this new environment has increased the value of enterprise risk management. To help you as ERM professionals address this changed risk environment, the planning team has put together a wonderful agenda to encourage dialogue on topics such as ERM in a COVID-19 world, using technology to improve risk transparency and response, integrating cybersecurity and enterprise risk management, and innovating the delivery of ERM in a virtual world. But before we hear from our first plenary speaker, I need to conduct some brief association business. Normally, we would hold a membership meeting on the second day of the summit and ask members to ratify the incoming slate of new board members. Unfortunately, in today's environment, we're not able to hold that traditional membership meeting as part of today's agenda, but we still need to ratify the incoming president-elect. The board voted to propose Daniela Detskowska as president-elect for the coming year. For all AFERM members, please use the polling function to cast your vote on ratifying Daniela as our new president-elect. We will give you a few minutes to register your vote. And while you're doing that, Daniela has been a very active member and supporter of AFERM since 2014. She's volunteered in a variety of capacities to the organization,
helping us with summit planning over the years, representing her organization as a CAG member, and serving the federal ERM community for over a decade and a half. Danielle is passionate about AFERM, passionate about enterprise risk management, and passionate about taking the organization and continuing to move it forward during her tenure on our board of directors. So I encourage you to ratify Daniela as the incoming president-elect, and I will wait for Kia to tabulate the results. Okay, the results are in. Thank you very much. Congratulations to Daniela on your selection as the incoming president-elect for our wonderful association. To kick off the summit, our first moderator, Bobby Jo Penka from Grant Thornton, will introduce our initial plenary speaker, Merlene Barrington from the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. Bobby Jo, I will turn the virtual stage over to you, and thank you.
Great, thanks, Ken. Good morning, everyone. My name is Bobby Jo Pankage, and I'm a managing director within Grant Thornton's public sector risk practice. And I'm so excited to be here today to kick off the 2020 AFERM Summit with our first plenary session. Like so many things in our lives, this was not what we expected. I would have loved to have seen everybody in person, but so excited to see nearly 400 people online today. I'm thrilled to introduce you to a wonderful plenary speaker, Merlene Barrington. Merlene is the Enterprise Risk Management Lead of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. I know we have a lot of East Coast folks here, so you may be familiar with the Port Authority, but Merlene will go into detail on all of the depth and breadth of the Port Authority's authority, if you will. Merlene earned a Master's of Public Administration in Public Policy and Administration degree, where she duly specialized and managed in management and operations, as well as human resource management from the City University of New York, John Jay College. Subsequently, Merlene successfully completed a very competitive management rotational program at the Port Authority, during which she led initiatives in areas including human capital, change management, strategic planning, finance, and grants management, bolstering her skills to understand the totality of the organization, which has come in very, very handy as her ERM lead position right now. After her rotation, she joined the Port Authority and has been within the enterprise risk management function ever since. As I mentioned, she leads the ERM function. She is responsible for developing and implementing the ERM program, which supports the proactive identification and management of risk for a complex organization. In this capacity, Merlene leads the enterprise with risk identification and assessment of significant risks and reports those agency risk profiles to the Board of Commissioners. Merlene collaborates with many C-suite executives to integrate the risk intelligence in the decision-making process. She also leads a team of practitioners responsible for assisting those business units with the identification, evaluation, and management of both business risk and controls. She has a constant focus on raising risk awareness, which she'll talk about today. The culmination of Merlene's career in public service reflects her innate commitment and passion to better the services for region, community, and people who depend on it each day. Merlene is the perfect person to talk to us today about enterprise risk management, articulating the value proposition of ERM. Before Merlene begins her presentation, we'd like to ask you 3 polling questions, which Kia will bring up. Great. So kind of the age-old question that we like to start with is, how mature is your ERM program? So we've put general answers as well as the RIMS maturity model answers. So not mature at all, so ad hoc, making progress for the initial level, moving towards maturity, somewhat mature, and very mature, where you've hit the leadership level.
All right, everyone, just go ahead and like you did earlier, please go ahead and put your answers right there on your screen. We will wait a few more seconds for those that are just joining us to answer the question. All right, and I will close the polling and show the results.
That's pretty amazing. That I've been helping with the AFERM Summit for many years now, and I know the majority of us were not mature at all up until a couple of years ago. So it's really great to see that there's so many organizations and agencies towards the bottom three of moving towards maturity, somewhat mature, and very mature. Very exciting, and I know it's a testament to AFERM and ERM in the federal and public sector. So that's great. And Merlene will talk about where the Port Authority is on their ERM maturity and their ERM journey here shortly. Can we go to question number 2, Kia? Perfect. Do you use a tool, so a commercial off-the-shelf tool or some other tool to help you collect, assess, and report on risks as part of your ERM program? Yes, we do use a CAPS tool. Yes, we use an in-house built tool. Yes, we use an enhanced version of Excel as our tool. And no, we do not use a tool.
All right, go ahead and cast your answer right there on your screen again. So to those that are putting in your answers in the chat box, go ahead and put it right there on this blue screen. Select your answer right there on your blue screen. Okay, let's go ahead and close the poll.
Okay, that's great. There are some that use a CAPS tool. Many use an in-house built tool, and a little bit more than the in-house tool is the advanced version of Excel. And then there still are quite a few of the folks who do not use the tool. Merlene will go into a little bit of detail on tools, whether it's Excel-based or commercial off-the-shelf that they've used or plan to use. So that's great information. The third question is a segue to let Merlene talk to you about all the great things that the Port Authority does. So this one is kind of a fun question. What types of transportation infrastructure does the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey operate and maintain? So rail and ports, airports and rail, tunnels, bridges, terminals, rail, ports, and ferries, World Trade Center, or all of the above. And I think the East Coast folks, Merlene, from New York and New Jersey may have a leg up on this question.
All right, let's leave you a few more seconds. Go ahead and cast your answer there right on your screen. All right, we'll go ahead and close the question. And there are your results.
All right. A little bit of rail and ports, a little bit of airports and rails. Majority of folks have chosen all of the above, and no one has chose just World Trade Center. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Merlene, where she has a great slide that that shows all the great things that they do and just how vast the risks and management of the Port Authority includes. A little bit of a background. Merlene's going to go through a few slides, probably about 20 minutes of background on the Port Authority. We will have some questions and answers that Merlene and I have discussed. Please send us some questions. We would love to hear what you would like Merlene to go into more detail with. And with that, Merlene.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Bobby Joe, for such a warm welcome. Truly, I'm excited to join a community of practitioners and professionals in the enterprise risk management field, particularly among peer organizations as well as in our colleagues in private sector. And so, as Bobby Joe mentioned, today I'd like to talk a little bit about the ERM program at the Port Authority, but also about the sometimes challenge of articulating the value proposition of an ERM program. While doing so, I'll share some tools and techniques that we've picked up along our journey. And with that, I'd like to pivot to the answer we've all been waiting for to that segue polling question that so much of you did so well on. And so, as many of you rightly answered, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey builds, operates, and maintains many of the most critical transportation and trade infrastructure assets in the country. The authority's transportation facilities annually move hundreds of millions of people and goods throughout the region, with gross operating revenues of about $5.5 billion in 2019. Assets include major airports such as John F. Kennedy International, LaGuardia, and Newark International Airports, serving about 140 million passengers by the end of 2019 alone. Our seaports move about 7.5 million TEUs of cargo in 2019. We also operate a commuter rail system called the PATH system that moves on an average weekday about 284,000 people between New York and New Jersey. And as if that wasn't enough, we also facilitate all manners of movement across the Hudson River via ferries, bridges, such as George Washington Bridge, tunnels including the Lincoln and Holland Tunnel, which serve about 244 million vehicles moving from one end of the river to the other. And finally, we oversee the World Trade Center site. The Port Authority, as you can see, or hear rather, is a large and complex organization with diverse lines of businesses, employing approximately 8,000 people, 75 to 80% of which are unionized. Though these figures are all pre-COVID-19, they do help to provide a snapshot of the breadth and depth of service the bi-state authority provides to a region that depends on it. Next slide, please. Thank you. And so now that we've gone through a snapshot of the Port Authority and the services as well as lines of businesses that we engage in, I'd like to give you a snapshot of the ERM program at the Port Authority in terms of its overall governance and structure. And so listed at the center of this slide are a list of key stakeholder groups as well as their roles. The Audit Committee is comprised of commissioners of the board, all 11 of which are appointed by New York and New Jersey governors. The Audit Committee serves as our executive sponsor and oversees the entirety of the ERM program. We partner with a steering committee comprised of chiefs, in other words, the most senior executive officers of the Port Authority. That steering committee is chaired by a chief financial officer. And so we collaborate with the steering committee to identify risks to strategy and to recommend authority-wide control. I have the distinct pleasure of leading and developing a team of practitioners responsible for the further implementation of the ERM program, aggregating and reporting risk intelligence, and facilitating authority-wide discussion on key risk areas. We also leverage a system that supports our process. We work with, lastly but surely not least, a point of contact stationed in each department throughout the enterprise. These points of contact coordinate subject matter inputs in assessing respective risks. Directors of each of these departments own department level risks and are responsible for the proactive management and monitoring of their risk portfolios. And so at the Port Authority, the goal of the ERM program is to enhance the overall business performance by providing an unsiloed forward view of risk to business and strategy, and to integrate risk information into decision-making and execution. Furthermore, we serve as the primary vehicle for elevating and discussing enterprise risks with the executive management and the board. So one of the most dreaded questions I faced early in my tenure in ERM was, so why do we need to do ERM? Or what's the value that your group brings? Or even, and perhaps most stinging, what's the point of your process again? I must admit, once I sensed any version of these questions coming, I did my best to avoid it. But there were times when simply ignoring it or avoiding it would do more damage because of the message I would be sending by not answering. And well, looking back, I'm grateful for those times because though I understood that ERM is a well-documented global best practice and simply the smart thing for an entity to do, I had to carefully consider the unique value that I could be certain that my specific ERM program can reliably deliver. I leveraged the framework that is before you on this slide to draft the value of the ERM function I lead at the Port Authority. And so, a value proposition in its simplest terms is a positioning statement that explains what benefit you provide, for who, and how you do it uniquely well. ERM's value proposition at the Port Authority is that we advance a proactive, interrelated portfolio view of significant risk to Port Authority objectives and strategy for decision-making and resource allocation. Given the vastness of the authority, as we just discussed a couple slides ago, the industries, customers, and services it engages, the need for informed decision-making and resource allocation is paramount. The benefit, therefore, is a business discipline or an ERM program that is broad and flexible enough to consider all types of risk, yet structured enough to surface those that are significant to the highest levels of decision-making. This, therefore, represents the why, or the benefit that our ERM program provides. Who, for obvious reasons, is the Port Authority and all of its stakeholders. How informs the unique service and output that we provide. The unique service we provide is highlighted in bold, and it is proactive, interrelated portfolio view of significant risk. Now, I'd like you to keep these words in the forefront of your mind because the tools and techniques that we will talk about today are those that we have relied on and leveraged to demonstrate the value of our ERM program and hence articulate our value proposition. And so those tools and techniques are top-down and bottom-up approach, root cause, and the risk library. Lastly, risk prioritization. The first technique is our overall approach to enterprise risk management at the Port Authority, top-down and bottom-up. This approach sets the stage for the interrelated portfolio view of risks, as well as the linkage between risks to objectives and strategy. This is a key aspect of our program's value proposition. To execute the top-down perspective, ERM works with the steering committee that we talked about, again, a couple slides earlier, to surface risks to Port Authority strategy. These are also known as strategic risks that typically affect all departments, but that no single department can completely control, such as climate change, for instance. Through the top-down process, ERM facilitates senior management risk-based conversations around strategy, utilizing best practices such as scenario planning and individual interviews. To surface the bottom-up perspective, on the other hand, We work with departments to identify and manage risk objectives. ERM then aggregates this information for inclusion in the authority's risk profile. Through the top-down and bottom-up approach, we collaborate with virtually every level of the authority to collect, communicate, and discuss sources of risk and balance the importance between strategic, operational, reputational, and financial risk. Together, this approach allows for effective oversight of risks to the authority. Now let's delve a bit more into an additional technique we leverage to further deliver this aspect of our value proposition. Oh, no, we can go one back. All right. Building on the first technique we talked about, the bottom-up perspective focuses on risks that can potentially affect department objectives over a 5-year time horizon and are controlled at the department level. In working with departments, it involves cross-functional and diverse teams, both for the perspectives these groups bring, as well as to build commitment to the ERM program adoption at the agency. Although the bottom-up interaction can generate a lengthy list of risks, quite quickly actually, these 5 steps captured here on this slide integrates existing processes and SME views across the authority to convey the vital few, or those risks that are significant, rather than the trivial many, through structured communication and prioritization of risks. Leveraging this technique allows us to yield that portfolio view of significant risks that you saw it boldened in the value proposition statement. Moving right along, the effective application of the bottom-up and top-down begins and ends with the Port Authority strategic framework, which sets the scope for risks to any level of the authority, as well as the analysis of risks to strategy. We leverage this tool to ensure that risks that are significant are within the context of our organization's strategy and therefore relevant to stakeholders. In order to achieve this, my team and I ensure a firm understanding of strategy and objectives so that proper scope is set around risk conversations. At the Port Authority, we're strategically focused on delivering peace of mind through world-class protection, delivering first-class operations through operational excellence, maintaining financial self-sufficiency, being an employer of choice by retaining, growing, and attracting top talent, reducing our environmental impact, and finally, revitalizing our infrastructure. At the department level, objectives are aligned with strategies. ERM therefore facilitates discussion on top risks influencing future performance as well as strategic priorities. The second tool we'll discuss is the root cause discipline. To help identify risk, we employ the root cause discipline to zero in on sources of risk. Typically, risk owners may have a worst case scenario in mind. And so the application of the root cause discipline will talk them through a pattern of thinking to arrive at the source cause of that worst case scenario, which is considered to be the risk that can materialize at some point within the next 5 years. As illustrated here on this slide, you'll note that the risk event and the final root cause after asking a series of why questions are significantly different. And so the goal here is to really unearth what is below the surface and is triggering the risk event that we're able to see manifesting before us. And so along this journey, specific information about conditions creating the risk is discovered and creates a basis for control activities aimed at preventing future events.
This is a key tool that we leverage to deliver our value proposition. Root cause enables us to deliver a proactive view of risk, which is another aspect of our value proposition, in that the root cause can be common to a number of risk events. Therefore, identifying, assessing, and mitigating root causes of risk can help prevent other risk events triggered by the same or similar root cause. The third tool we'll touch on today is the risk library. Our risk library provides a common language for sources of risk. The common language for risk is essential to our ability to convey an interrelated view of risk by providing context for understanding the relationships among risks, thereby critically supporting our value proposition. We leverage this tool by facilitating an iterative risk selection dialogue, one in which risk owners select root causes from the risk library, but serve as experts in possible future business ailments or risk events. And the ERM team, while we serve as experts on the risk library or the authority's common language for enterprise risk, we also help ensure that the risks that are selected accurately reflects the projected point of concern. During our off-cycle times of the year, we do work in a structured way with SMEs and risk owners to update and edit the risk library to ensure continued relevance to the authority's business and operational context. The general construct of the library entails 5 broad categories, as you see depicted on this slide. Specifically, risk arising from the external category stem from people, entities, and/or environments that are outside of the authority's control. Risks stemming from Port Authority employees are captured in the people category. Risks stemming from organizational processes, are captured in the process category. Risks stemming from relationships with third-party vendors, contracts, or agreements are included in the relationships category. And lastly, the systems category includes risks stemming from our physical and technological infrastructure. The last tool we'll review is risk prioritization. The financial and service level effects of risk are assessed across 3 dimensions: impact, likelihood, and effectiveness of current controls at reducing inherent risk. The results yield a priority ranking of risks, which are aggregated up and across the authority, supporting the raising of significant risks for decision-making and resource allocation. When assessing inherent, risk owners consider the worst-case scenario that is most probable, which allows the risk to be assessed at the driver level. Risk briefings are tailored specifically to each stakeholder group for incorporation into decision-making, further demonstrating our value proposition to every level of the authority. I could not conclude this discussion this morning without addressing the unprecedented crisis and times we find ourselves living in today. One way that the ERM program at the Port Authority has set out to ensure that our value proposition is sustained is by reevaluating it, asking ourselves 2 key questions. How has the need of the Port Authority changed? And how does the ERM benefit, or the way it's delivered, need to adapt? Quoting from a North Carolina State article released this past May, in a time of great uncertainty, decisions are being taken today by governments and businesses that will determine how these risks or opportunities emerge and play out. With changing industry structures and changing competitive positions, how do we not only survive, but also find the silver linings? In other words, how do we survive and thrive? I think this pretty much conveys the need of many organizations and companies here on this virtual conference. Specifically at the Port Authority, our value proposition is clearly understanding the unique service we provide and how we do it allowed us to make critical decisions about how we could continue to demonstrate our value in this unprecedented time. And so some of the ways we were able to support during the various phases of recovery include leveraging our ERM data to inform baseline assumptions for business continuity scenarios, as well as risk re-evaluation. Understanding the nature of the COVID-19 event is one that accelerates, or otherwise alters existing risk portfolios in large part. Therefore, the authority's 2019 risk profile serves as a good starting point for re-evaluating the myriad changes that has and will ensue. Secondly, we leveraged our internal capability to be forward and holistic thinkers, as well as our research capacity to inform investment decisions our colleagues around the enterprise were tasked for making as it pertains to safe resumption of our operations. And so in this way, we were able to collaborate and support this critical task of making these decisions that will stay with us far beyond the current crisis. And lastly, ERM has continuously scanned the environment, identifying and understanding emerging risk trends for further consideration in both immediate and longer range decision making. Now, I know that we've covered quite a bit of information over the past several slides, and establishing your program's value proposition is by no means an easy task. But one thing I'd like to leave with you is this. What I've learned is that despite the crisis you may find yourself leading through, a well-articulated value proposition serves as an anchor, consistently letting you know what you're uniquely good at, as well as how you are able to uniquely deliver that benefit to your entity. Of course, considering your internal capabilities. I have leveraged the framework that we were able to view several slides earlier to articulate and draft the value proposition for the ERM program at the authority. And so with each change in capabilities on the teams that you lead, there will always be some things that you do uniquely well. The value proposition framework helps to focus on those things and connect it with the benefits you are uniquely poised to deliver and provide to your organization. And with that, I think it's a good time to take a moment and answer a few questions from the audience. And for that, I turn it over to Bobby Jo. Thank you.
Thank you, Marlene. Thanks for sharing your journey, the way that you have really articulated a very strong value proposition. We've had several questions come in from the audience. I think this one would be a great one based on what you just shared, moving into the, into post-COVID, or, we're still in COVID. The world of COVID right now in the 21st century technology is a vital part of, a port standard. They're wondering, could you please describe the technology you are using to manage your ERM program? And I know when we spoke previously, you had used a tool and maybe using a different tool. So could you go into a little bit more detail on your future plans on technology tools that you plan to use?
Sure. So yes, in the inception of the ERM program at the Port Authority, we did use a commercially available tool that, of course, was tailored to the needs of the program. We've since migrated into a different tool, and we're now using MetricStream, and we're currently in a period of transition where we are considering the pros and cons of migrating to their more current platform. But what I would say this, having and using a system that is well tailored to your process does help to mature and make the data that you collect just a little bit more real to your stakeholders. And so we do hope to continue to use an ERM system. It really supports the growth and maturity of the ERM program.
Thank you, Marlene. Based on that, I know you said, your ERM program's over 10 years old. How mature would you say on the maturity level that you all are in? A polling question. I was very excited to see that folks were kind of, in the at least making progress and moving towards maturity, repeatable level. Where would the Port Authority fall?
So I would say that we are at the repeatable level. We have an ERM program that is scalable, it's repeatable, and it's in a sustainable place. Our program has survived several turns of leadership on the governance ranks, and our program has also survived transition of leadership within the program itself. So that's, among other things, a good indicator of a program that's definitely repeatable and sustainable. And so I'd say that's where we are today.
That's great. And you'd mentioned, leadership change. Did you have top-level support from the beginning when you all first stood up your ERM program? And how did you show the value, the early days of your value proposition to those leaders?
Sure. Well, I was not part of the inception of the program, but what I would say is this: during my tenure, what I have seen is the need to continue to revisit the value that your program brings, not only to the organization, but to the leadership that you're working and serving at that time. And so it requires a constant reevaluation of what the needs are, both at the executive leadership realm as well as the lines of businesses and staff departments and operations that you serve. And what I'd also add is that, having a well-established value proposition statement certainly does take and make the iterative process of revisiting, reevaluating the value and the needs of your organization. That's much easier and executable without missing too much of a beat as you navigate changes.
Could you give maybe a specific example, maybe recently, how you've demonstrated the value to your stakeholders? I know that you gave an example earlier. I'm sorry, what was that?
I'm sorry, Bobby. Could you repeat the beginning of that question? I think I missed it.
Sure thing. Could you give an example of how you've provided value recently to a stakeholder or a business unit where, or a pivotal moment where you've made people a believer in your program?
Sure. So in 2019, I led a robust top-down and bottom-up risk assessment exercise that resulted in the engagement of the entire board of commissioners. I'm sorry, I'm having a technical difficulty here. Okay, I think I'm back. And so during this exercise, I was able to convey to the board drivers to a set of enterprise risks and key ways that the enterprise has mitigated those risks to date, but that some residual concerns remain. And as a result, the board aligned with senior executive ownership of functional risk areas and requested a series of deep dives into key risk areas to be conducted, led under the leadership of the executive risk owners, thereby significantly increasing board-level engagement. There was also a cultural shift in the acceptance of ERM as a main way for elevating risk discussion to the board level. This year, despite COVID-19, we've continued to facilitate deep dives on key risk areas, demonstrating our resilience and our ability to adapt.
Perfect. Related to your deep dive, I know that your program does deep dives. Do you all have an internal control or an internal audit function within your group or within the authority that you work closely with?
Sure. We do have an internal audit department, and we partner with that department. We brief them on the authority's enterprise risk profile, and that in turn informs their audit plan for the upcoming year or years. And we are also part of their report out and brief on the findings of audits that they've conducted. And that helps to inform, from an objective standpoint, the effectiveness of controls that departments tag in their risk assessment process. And so it's definitely a partnership, and it's one that works well in supporting, bringing a little bit more objectivity to risk assessment, specifically the assessment of control effectiveness.
Great. Related to that, an audience member wants to know how you verify or verify that your impact and likelihood scores are not biased. So do you have a process to help, lessen the bias?
Yeah, that's certainly a really good question. And what I would say is that built into the bottom-up process that we talked about a few minutes ago, we integrate and speak with, literally, those leaders of central agency processes, such as business planning, business performance metrics, project management, and the budget process. And the reason we do that is to get their input on what they've seen in terms of, the strategy and objectives, or the metrics or performance metrics, or where projects stand and how effective they're being managed, as well as the needs for resources that departments have articulated. And so what that knowledge share allows us to challenge whatever the department is ascribing in terms of impact and likelihood. And the true value is that it creates this sort of iterative and involved conversation around risk, where sometimes, a lot of the times really, the department just may not be aware of certain other aspects of the risk. And so our relationships with the owners of central agency processes gives us the information that helps to bring a bit more rigor and objectivity to the assessment of impact and likelihood. We also have an anchor, that is part of our program, and a series of descriptors for each interval of assessment or rating that a department can ascribe to impact and likelihood. And it's tied into a central agency process or capital planning process at the authority. And so leveraging those two avenues, there is a certain amount of subjectivity, that is, but we do infuse a bit more objectivity by leveraging those two avenues to challenge and refine responses to impact and likelihood.
Great. And you had mentioned in the budget process, how do you tie budget and resource allocation to your ERM process?
Yeah, great question. So we have two tenets to our process, right? We have top down and we have bottom up. The bottom up is specifically designed to tie into resource allocation decisions, in that the bottom up limits the view of risk to be within 5 years. So when departments are identifying risk, the question is, all right, what can get in the way of your achieving your objectives within the next 5 years? That 5-year window creates a larger focus on immediate actions that need to take place, which is a key piece of information when it comes to those resource allocation decisions. Another way that we tie in through our bottom-up process to resource allocation is by briefing and sharing risk data that's been collected through our process in advance of the budget cycle with the owners of budget. Also, as departments are, working on their budgets, they have their ERM data already in hand because we've positioned the timing to occur before the budget process. We support and help them articulate the business case for resources in order to manage risk. And so we literally support both stakeholder groups by identifying their need and meeting it at that place. Because remember, the overall goal is to ensure that resources are indeed allocated to manage risk. That's something that everyone can agree with, whether it's an executive or a department, or even in a resource-constrained environment. And so we work on both sides to ensure that there are clear understanding about the risks that need resources first and foremost.
Perfect. And another audience question is about root cause. So I know that we had talked on slide 10, you described the root cause analysis process. Can you share an example of when you use the root cause analysis to assess a certain risk? And part 2 of that question is how your organization evaluates the contribution of each root cause to the overall risk profile. So kind of getting into the inherent risk assessment that you had mentioned. So the first part being—
So I'll answer this. Yes. Well, I'll go ahead and answer the first question, and I may need you to chime in and remind me of the second part. So an example of a time that root cause was used is when the need for clearer business alignment was surfaced as an enterprise risk. And so during the executive level risk discussion, the root cause discipline was leveraged to understand the source of the risk, business alignment, as well as the conditions that created the risk, namely the fact that the Port Authority was preparing to make long-term and short-term decisions regarding capital and strategic investments. And the need for clarity around strategic direction so that departments could be aligned was expressed through our process. As a result, ERM was entrusted with leading an unprecedented organization-wide and cross-functional scenario planning effort, for which we did receive funding to procure the services of a consultant. The effort included analysis of 5 distinct scenarios within a 25-year outlook, all of which incorporated unique yet plausible global, national, and regional political, social, and economic trends that yielded strategic considerations that has influenced a myriad of key decisions and informs the strategic framework that we have today.
That's a great example, and one where you can tie, getting funding for that business unit owner. The second part was, so that's a great specific root cause example. The audience member was wondering how you take each of the root causes and pull it up to your whole risk profile. So how do you know which ones to prioritize?
Okay. So we have a library of about 77 root causes, I think, today. And so right there, we try to keep it at a manageable number by having a rigorous process around what exactly is a root cause and how do we describe it and what are the risk events that could possibly emerge. So we definitely collaborate with risk owners and SMEs to ensure that that language is effective and relevant. And so during the risk assessment process, although, again, they come to the risk workshop or the risk dialogue with a worst case scenario in mind, what we do is we help them peel the surface to that worst case scenario until we get to a place where a root cause from our library is identified, or the key root cause that is truly something that is causing the worst case scenario and something that we can possibly control is discovered. And so the department at that point would go ahead and, write down that risk on their risk assessment, if you would. And because our process is both quantitative and qualitative, there is 6 areas in the risk assessment where the department can not only tag the root cause, but articulated the scenario behind it. So what can go wrong, right? The story, the narrative. And then move on to assess, with that in mind, with the drivers in mind, the precise impact and likelihood and the effectiveness of relevant controls to that risk.
Thank you for that, explanation. Another question was around assuming cybersecurity is part of your risk profile, somewhat a given these days. How are you integrating cyber and ERM? So do you integrate it, or is it
excellent? What was that last part? I missed.
Whether it's a risk, on your risk profile, or if you integrate cyber and ERM as part of your program?
So as you know, cyber risk definitely requires a certain level of specificity and expertise. I say that because although we do connect the processes, cyber risk is definitely part of the authority's risk portfolio. We do rely on the more granular specific cyber risk program to assess the specific threat landscape of the authority. And then once that's done, that information now informs the drivers or the specific status of the cyber risk within the enterprise portfolio view of risk. And so, we'll surface that information to the board, and, similar to this year, if there are more specific questions through our process, the board will require that deep dives are done. It's actually one of the deep dives we did Q1 of this year. And so what I'll do is literally work with the executive owner of cyber risk to delve a little bit more deeply, a little bit more into the precise quantification of impact and the likelihood of the risk landscape, and most importantly, what we're doing or should be doing or need to do to manage that risk. And so there is a granular specific cyber risk process, but then there's also a tie back into the more, the broader enterprise process for elevating significant risk. The reason why we do not take on the specific, technicality of cyber risk within the ERM department is because of the vastness of the Port Authority. If we were to do that, it would limit us from our ability to also take on that level of granularity for other types of risk. And so we remain at sort of a broader level so that we can, in fact, be a true resource to the board and, in a consumable way, raise an entire risk profile that is flexible and broad enough to account for all risks, but structured enough to hone in on those that are truly significant.
That's great. I know you mentioned you had 4 FTE, but I think you said 125 kind of business unit POC. So I assume you leverage that kind of format in order to have the broad reach, but the working with the experts.
Absolutely.
A question came in of how long ago did the Port Authority get serious about ERM?
Okay, that's an interesting question. I think the Port Authority was serious about ERM from day one. However, there's certainly been a growth and a maturity in understanding what ERM is and how it can best be leveraged at our agency to meet our specific needs. I think that's the part that's been a little bit more fluid and changing over time. But I don't think that we can use that to say that we weren't serious. I think the fact that ERM was initiated as a board agenda item, we had the support of our board members very early on. And so there's definitely clear interest, clear importance. And so as a, an organization together, we grew in our understanding and our understanding and of the value and importance of ERM. And so that's reflected into how the program is operating today.
Perfect. And I think the audience question kind of relates to a question that we had talked about before too. Decline of ridership, whether it was pre or post COVID, a little bit of both, I'm sure. How did the ERM program help management decide how to deal with a decline in ridership?
Yeah, that's definitely a tough one. So we knew our ridership would be affected, but by how much was really what we had to watch and understand with time. And so our lines of businesses were really at the forefront of understanding and tracking those impacts. But as ridership declined, remaining true to our ERM mandate, we took a proactive, beyond the surface look at what's driving this decline of ridership. And, consistent with the nature of the current pandemic, it is fear. It's, consumers, being fearful of being further exposed to this very contagious virus. And so with that understanding, what we were able to do is bring that holistic and forward view to conversations that were intent on deciding what to invest limited resources in terms of initiatives and systems and tools that are needed for safe operations or safe resumption of operations. So the lens that we bought helped to broaden the thinking so that we are not only making decisions that are beneficial for today, but that can position us for continued success beyond the crisis.
Great, and not sure if you can share this, but someone was wondering if climate change is identified as one of your highly ranked risks for the authority.
So I'm not at liberty to delve too much into detail with about the authority's current risk portfolio. I would say that consistent with many peer organizations and like private entities in terms of breadth and depth, what I would say is that climate change is definitely a top priority. As you saw with our strategic framework, it's an area that we have intentionally focused on so that we are being responsible neighbors and service providers to the region that we serve. And so you can rest assured that there is not only a strategic, but a well-intentioned operational focus on managing the impacts of climate change.
Thank you. And I know we talked about it previously, and I think you touched on it very lightly, but did you all have a watershed moment that triggered, your real support of ERM, understanding that you weren't with the program on day one?
I think that we had maybe about 3 of those sort of moments, really, where the tides really began to change. The first was when we shifted to a system and simultaneously adopted the root cause discipline, allowing for the extensive data that we collect through our process to be aggregated and relayed in consumable format to decision makers. And so decision makers are finally able to see what we were talking about from a risk stance and in a meaningful way without living in the weeds of every unique risk event. Secondly, another sort of event that happened that helped to turn the tide was when we initiated the top-down tenet of our process. This raised the risk conversation to the highest levels of executive leadership. And third, in the adoption of executive risk owners for functional risk areas and the board level expectation of deep dive by those executives on respective functional risk areas has expanded board level engagement and has positively affected the culture around risk and the role of ERM as a port authority. So, I feel like these sorts of moments occur over time, and there's sort of pivotal moment in the maturation of any ERM programs. I think that summarize some of the ones that come to mind in thinking about ERM's journey over the past 11 years.
Great. And someone else asked, for the root cause analysis, do you use a specific tool? Do you use that commercial off-the-shelf tool or a different type of tool?
So initially, we did use the commercial off-the-shelf tool to orient ourselves and the organization to the frame and usage of the risk library, the overall structure. But I would say that over the course of 11 years, well, one, we've sort of transitioned to another tool during that time, and the risk library has become such a key part of our process. It's been tailored over time in terms of language and in terms of how we educate and use the root cause approach and library over time with the agency. And so we started off using a system, but over time has been much more and significantly tailored to the needs and what's appropriate for the authority.
Great, and I think we have a little less than 10 minutes, so I'm trying to get through everybody's questions. There's some great questions. I know that you shared, one example of kind of a positive change that the ERM program kind of was part of, and getting the funding for that organizational study. Do you have any other specific examples that an ERM action caused a positive change in the Port Authority?
I think another example that might be neat to talk about is some of the preliminary results of the deep dive that we've been engaging in this year. So as I've mentioned earlier on in this meeting, we went through a very robust top-down and bottom-up exercise last year, and the board specifically requested that deep dives be conducted and presented to them at different intervals throughout 2020. And so in facilitating the deep dive on cyber risk earlier this year, as a result of engaging the board members on, the tenets of the overall cybersecurity program, what comprises our risk landscape, and the resources that are needed to continue to support the great work on managing this risk. In the moment, we literally got live feedback from the board, which is, well, what do you need? What are the resources that you need? How can we support? And so I'd like to share that because I think that's pivotal, right, for the value that an ERM program brings, right? It is the communication in an elucidated way, but yet meaningful way of those risks that can plague the organization in very real ways. And so we were able to do that. And in response, the board they conveyed their support and asked some very specific questions about decisions that need to be made to further support and allocate resources to manage this specific risk area.
Great, and I think this one's a really interesting question. Could you provide an example of a root cause, and is fear a root cause that you have come across?
Fear. Wow, we don't exactly have fear in our risk library. We do have consumer behavior and how it changes. So changes in consumer behavior is a risk in our library. That is an option that departments can use, and it's one that it has been coming up a lot, I'd say, in risk conversations, because embedded in that is, fear that our stakeholders, that our consumers, that our customers, that many other people may have. And so the way fear has been manifesting, it feels like more of a risk event, but really ends up changing how the consumer behaves and interacts with our services. So I think I was able to cover both questions with that response. So an example of a root cause in our libraries, changes in consumer behavior. And certainly from that root cause, you can begin to target to understand however fear plays a role in whatever risk event that the risk owner may be concerned with.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely answered both. Appreciate that. I'm going to probably have time for two more questions. One is, do you feel the relationship that you had built? I know that your program has been around for 10 years and you've been in your position for several years. Do you think the support you've built helped you post-COVID?
Absolutely.
Around your value.
Yes, absolutely. Prior to COVID, because of the work that had been done in previous years, ERM developed sort of a name for itself. We became known for certain internal capabilities, certain technical capacity. And so that's what stuck in people's minds, right? And the value that, our holistic, our forward thinking, our research capacity yield. And so through my relationships and the identity that the program was able to build over the course of time, when a crisis hit, people sort of revert to what they know. And so because these relationships and the identity of ERM was in place, people reverted to, okay, this is what I know about ERM. So here are the kinds of questions I need you to help me out with. And so that's how we found ourselves supporting the agency in the three sort of ways I talked about during the presentation. You know, in departments, for example, we're thinking about, well, what are these sorts of systems or tools or initiatives we need to put our dollars towards to ensure that we can resume safe operations. We were prepared with research as to what's happening across the world. How are other similar entities ensuring safe operations? What are they using? And really bring another lens to that conversation so the best possible decision is made because we have all the information that we possibly could have facing a crisis such as this. And so, you know, having these sort of identities in place in the minds of people certainly does help, right, to accommodate natural human reaction in times of crisis, which again is to revert to what you know.
That's great. And one last question. How has your program changed, or how will it change in the near future based on your experiences with COVID-19?
Sure. Well, we're still fleshing that out, to be very transparent with you. What we do know thus far is that there is definitely a need for more focus on risks that may emerge. Virtual work is here to stay, or here for the long haul at least, so we'll have to figure out how to make our process engaging in a virtual environment. And we will need clear understanding of any risks that may arise as a result of the current circumstances or decisions that we make today so that they can be proactively managed. So knowing these three things, I suspect, as you know, we continue throughout the phases of recovery, it will become clearer how exactly we answer those two key questions as we reevaluate our value proposition. And once we're able to do that, we'll certainly have a more finite picture of what ERM at the Port Authority will look like in the coming years. I don't think, again, it'll be a huge deviation from what we do, but it's more about tailoring what we already do uniquely well, or understanding what we do need to develop to meet the arising and changing needs of the organization that we exist to serve.
Thank you so much, Marlene. I'd like to give you a big virtual round of applause. And really thank you for your time and effort and sharing your story, your journey, and giving us a lot of things to think about, as I know a lot of us are thinking about value proposition, especially in this time of COVID-19. So truly appreciate all of your time and support to AFERM.
Thank you. I truly appreciated the opportunity to speak today. It was actually quite fun. So thank you for the invitation.
Definitely. And for everyone on the call, as Meredith mentioned, you can stay on. This will be the platform until right before lunch or right after lunch. So we're pleased to present the AFERM sponsor and partner videos that will be displayed in just 1 minute. So please stay online, take a quick break, but enjoy the sponsor and partner videos. And we will return at 10:30. So it's 10:14 right now. At 10:30, the next plenary session will start. Really appreciate everyone's time and attention, and hope you're having a great morning so far. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Laura Price, a partner in KPMG's Federal Advisory Practice. Despite the disruptions we're feeling in our professional lives, there are a few things we need to continue focusing on. First is the need to harness data to make better decisions. We need to be continuing to find ways to use technology to do that so that our users can make better decisions in the future. Second, We need to remain steadfast in the use of automation to improve the processes that we perform every day and the tasks that go into sound financial management and financial oversight. These simple steps can help our government leaders focus on what's on the horizon, whether it be managing risks or looking for new opportunities. And let's not forget how important government oversight of federal funding is going to be. We as financial managers have the skill sets and disciplines necessary to perform those tasks, which will be invaluable going forward in the coming years. KPMG has a long history of helping federal, state, and local organizations manage through crisis. We are proud of what we have done in the past, and we are more passionate about doing so now and in the future.
Hi, I'm Scott McIntyre, and I'd like to briefly introduce Guidehouse. Our mission focuses on solving big problems, building trust in society, and improving the quality of life. And we do this across our commercial and public sector businesses in healthcare, public sector financial services, and within our energy, sustainability, and infrastructure business, or ESI.
Hi, AGA and AFERM members. I'm Cynthia Vitters, Managing Director of Deloitte's Government and Public Services Enterprise Risk Management Practice. Deloitte's ERM practice is comprised of professionals dedicated exclusively to the delivery of ERM solutions. They possess deep technical and industry experience and have helped design, implement, and mature ERM programs for clients in the federal industry, major U.S. cities, institutions of higher education, nonprofit entities, and Fortune 500 companies. The COVID-19 pandemic illustrates the importance of a disciplined and innovative risk management approach. Our practice is committed to supporting our clients as they face uncertainty and seize strategic opportunities. Much progress has been made to date leveraging ERM to manage the government's toughest challenges. We're excited to join you here today to learn from your insights and share our own proven innovative solutions. Thank you.
Hi, I'm David Zavada from Carney & Company. We're pleased to sponsor the 13th Annual ERM Summit. This training is always valuable, but risk management is especially pertinent this year. We're grateful AFERM transitioned to a virtual event so that we could all learn and discuss the future of ERM. As the premier CPA firm focused exclusively on the federal government, Carney has been a leader in the area of internal controls and ERM for many years. We have been involved in thought leadership on these topics for more than a decade. Carney assists some of the largest federal agencies in implementing ERM models. That's why we're proud to sponsor AFERM's 13th Annual ERM Summit. To learn more about Carney, visit us at www.carneyco.com. Enjoy the training. Thank you.
Welcome to RSA's virtual booth at the AFERM 2020 Summit. We wish we could be with you in person, but are grateful to have an opportunity to talk with you about how RSA can help you with enterprise risk management. During this AFERM Summit, we are hosting a panel with NIST and agency experts to discuss practical considerations for integrating cybersecurity with ERM. This is a session you surely will not want to miss. Here in the virtual booth, you will find some helpful reading materials on how RSA can help you achieve your mission and objectives. Whether your challenges stem from modernization, malice, or mandates, RSA can help. Our team is standing by right now to chat and answer any questions you might have. So, come on in to our virtual booth to learn more about RSA's public sector offerings and visit us on the web at this rsa.com link.
Hello Summit attendees, I'm Chris Hare, EY's representative on AFERM's Corporate Advisory Group, and I'd like to welcome you all to the 13th Annual AFERM Summit. From hospitals to housing and everything else in between, COVID-19 has completely changed our world. The speed and impact of this change is unprecedented, and the impact on businesses, governments, and industry continues to evolve. Now more than ever, it's important for risk leaders to have key information in a timely manner. EY has been a proud sponsor of AFERM for over the past decade, and we've loved watching the organization grow. We'd like to invite you all to attend our session this afternoon entitled ERM in a COVID-19 World, where we'll explore real-world examples from both government and industry leaders as they've grappled with the pandemic over the past 6 months. We'd also like to invite you all to check out our virtual booth, where you can learn more about EY's next-gen ERM capabilities and check out materials. We look forward to the time when we can all be together again and wish you all a great conference.
My name is Martin O'Malley. I'm the former governor of Maryland, and I now have the honor to work with some really talented people at Grant Thornton as a senior advisor on smart governance. In fact, I wrote the book on smarter government. I wanted to say, just bring you a word of welcome, greetings, and encouragement to everybody this year. In these times when we face such an unprecedented world challenge of this pandemic, it is more important than ever that we actually make our government work. So thank you. Thank you for what you do for all of us. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for realizing that darkness makes a great canvas. And sometimes it's in the face of the greatest adversity that our greatest progress is actually made. Thanks a lot.
All right, everyone, it is about 10:28 a.m. We are going to start at 10:30. So if you are just getting back from getting coffee or snack, we have 2 more minutes. Oh, Meredith, I think you're still muted.
Hello, welcome back everyone. Marlene and Bobby Joe, thank you for sharing the techniques the Port Authority uses to identify the vital few, which influence strategic priorities. You certainly set the bar high and started the morning off right. For those that are just joining us or did not hear the CPE tracking instructions this morning, throughout each session, you'll see a red letter on the upper left part of the slide. As you see this slide here, write down the letter in your notes. This is not one of the ones you'll need to write down for CPE tracking purposes. This is just a sample. There are 3 letters per session and will appear one at a time. For example, here you'll see the letter Z in the upper left-hand corner of the box. This is the CPE tracking letter you would write down. If you're participating only by phone, we cannot announce the letters. Make sure you identify the session number that goes with the CPE letters, and at the end of the summit, you'll receive an email with a survey from the AGA National Office, and in the survey, you'll be asked to enter the letters to each session, so it's important that for each session, you write down your CPE letters. Please don't announce the letters to the fellow attendees in the chat box, as it's against NASPA policy, and you'll be ineligible to earn CPE credits for this webinar. Well, let's begin the next plenary session. Please welcome Kate Silvis from Guidehouse as our moderator. Kate, the floor is yours.
Oh, Kate, I think you're still muted.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yep, you're all set to go.
All right, thanks. Good morning, Summit. My name is Kate Silvis, and I am a director with Guidehouse in our risk consulting practice. It's my distinct honor this morning to introduce Tom Easthope from Microsoft. Tom is one of the senior members of Microsoft's ERM team, and he's currently responsible for driving the company's ERM focus on information and enterprise IT, as well as continuity and response. And he joined Microsoft in 2007 in the Enterprise Business Continuity Program area. Tom oversees Microsoft's internal implementation of the NIST cybersecurity framework and contributes to ERM's risk framework methodology, enterprise aggregation, and business risk engagement process in the cloud and AI engineering division. He's leading a RIM strategic enterprise risk initiative to update the RIM's maturity model. Prior to joining Microsoft, Tom founded and led 2 startup business endeavors, which resulted in acquisitions by suppliers. He has a bachelor's degree in economics from the University of Michigan and an MBA from George Washington University. Tom, I'm really excited to hear about Microsoft's journey around ERM. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you. Kate, thank you very much for being my moderator today and being my connection to the great unseen members of AFERM. And thank you to the AFERM board for this invitation. As I'm saying and dishing out the thank yous, I'd also like to thank all of the members here in attendance today. As you mentioned, I got my MBA at GW and spent about 8 years in DC, and in that time I learned about the importance of your missions, and I want to thank you all for your public service. Today I'd like to spend about 30 or 40 minutes sharing a perspective from the private sector, and hopefully that that perspective will inspire some good questions, because I think that that's perhaps the point where these kind of shotgun type presentations have more value to people, is when we can maybe inspire a question that gets to a particular interest. So with that, I'm going to see if we can start moving these slides along. Okay, there we go. Today, my talk is going to be broken into about 4 sections. I'm going to do a little bit of a comparison about our ecosystems and the public sector versus private. I'd like to spend some time talking about Microsoft's ERM journey. And certainly, that's not a victory lap. It's more from a practitioner's perspective on how did we get to where we are today. And then next, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the areas, the key areas that we focus on as an ERM team today, and maybe dive deeper into what does trust mean, and also maybe talk about some key emerging areas that our team focuses on. And then lastly, I'd like to talk a little bit about looking forward in terms of how do we think we need to get better going forward. So let's get into it. So as I started reflecting on the, what I would talk to you guys about today, I started asking myself, what lessons does Microsoft have that, or insights that would be relevant or interesting to this group? And so I started thinking about how our different environments are the same or different. And while I can't go through every one of your particular circumstances, I'll talk a little bit about the private sector and our experience at Microsoft. Certainly, as a company in big tech, we certainly have a lot of focus from Wall Street, and with respect to our team, that means that we are big consumers of our earnings data, and more specifically, analyst questions. We also participate very actively in the preparation of our company's disclosure documents. We also operate at just a mind-boggling scale in terms of our operating environment. Today, we are operating in 61 regions across the world, and as an example, we care about and worry about the updating of 1 billion monthly active Windows devices. Which is just a staggering number when you think about it. We also have been lucky to have 3 great leaders, and they have really formed and the company and had a very personal impact on where we are today. Starting with Bill Gates and the early work he did as a founder and now as leader at the Gates Foundation. But it's also Steve Ballmer, and Steve really built Microsoft's enterprise business. And in 2010, he committed the company to moving to the cloud. And I sometimes doesn't get enough credit for some of that work that he did. And then in 2014, Satya Nadella took over. And Satya grew up professionally within Microsoft and is now an architect of just a huge corporate culture change at a massive scale, and is position the company to be doing very well into the future. You know, as we think about the role of technology, it's very interesting. I think you know while many in the public sector you know were leaders in developing and initially implementing technology, you know, the private sector has really worked to build on that foundation and create efficiencies and innovations. But you know, for a company like ours that's been in business for over 40 years, you know, I think we both have some other things in common as well, which is that legacy has its downsides in terms of legacy technology that you have to support, and which can be a burden and creates a mandate for digital transformation. So I think, you know, when it all comes down, I think we have a lot in common between our different organizations, and I think some things that we can learn from each other from. And so with those similarities in mind, let's talk a little bit about the ERM journey. So I've broken our journey into 3 kind of discrete phases. These aren't necessarily academic or anything like that. It's more my view of the world. And you can kind of, you know, for the parents out there, you can also maybe assign, you know, toddler, teen, and young adults to these phases. And let's go and talk about each one of them. So in the early days, you know, Microsoft introduced enterprise risk management into the company as a program in late 2006, early 2007. The driver principally was Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, more specifically Section 404, which required companies to establish a set of internal controls. And enterprise risk management was identified as one of those controls. I would say that this period kind of is characterized by 3 things you see here in the right. We originally organized the practice around, you know, the original COSO framework and its 4 pillars, those being strategic, legal compliance, financial reporting, and operations. And I have to say it was a federated model, meaning that, you know, each group kind of worked in its own little pillar and not really coming together, not really understanding that about the interconnectedness of the topics that they worked on, and really only coming together in the last stages of what we consider our reporting process. That period is also marked by a series of long reports where I think the organizational rigor was measured by the length of the report. I can personally attest to being part of a 190-page report that I was, you know, somewhat uncertain if anybody was going to read from page to page. And then lastly, you know, we did have some cultural challenges. You know, the enterprise risk management function was a new kind of advisory function that was, you know, more or less there because of a regulatory a compliance matter, not a founder's choice. And it was really hard to develop business value or the perception of business value with our CEO and the CEO suite because of that. And so what kind of resulted in those early years was a very solid foundation for compliance and really a good, strong orientation to the COSO framework, but less on delivering business value and helping management. So from there, we moved to what we'll call the developing, or what I call the teen phase. This phase, I think, is characterized by, the confluence of a number of risk practices, certainly ERM, but also the growing function of what we'll call in our company divisional risk practices, and then with those two functions, then also having to coordinate with what we would call domain specialists, people that were information security or Office of Legal Compliance specialists that really outlined and drove policy. And it was kind of a bit of a chaotic time in that respect, because there was overlapping charters and people not necessarily working on common frameworks or having different ideas about what the best framework would be. And it took some time for us to kind of sort through that. That time is also, I think, marked by the introduction of GRC and governance, risk, and compliance, and the tooling that supported that. I saw the sponsor note about from RSA, and certainly we had several instances of the Archer software in play at Microsoft at that time, and all developed with kind of a different look, but trying to serve that divisional team's narrow interests. As we kind of moved through this phase, in corporate America, there became a trend where a lot of companies that had somewhat independent business divisions and all that started to centralize, and certainly Microsoft was not immune to that. We under the kinds of a one Microsoft type of approach, many functions in our company were centralized, and enterprise risk management was included in that. We were, as a previously federated group, kind of merged together and into a centralized team that was placed in the finance organization under the direction of the chief audit executive. And that was a big change for us. And then lastly, I think it was in this time that we started to figure out kind of the secret sauce, if you will, to being able to establish a better rapport with the business leaders in the company. And it was really through the realization that, if we positioned our business as or the ERM function as a strategy assurance function, we could talk with business leaders and more directly and in a very supportive way about their business strategies and essentially what has to go right or what can't go wrong, and turn that risk discussion into a business discussion. And that was certainly, I think, a big change for us, and certainly opened up our engagement quite significantly across the company. And so going through all of that brings us to where we find ourselves today in what we'll call the evolving or young adult phase of our journey. And it's interesting because as we've enjoyed a fair amount of success as a company, the company and I think our ERM function really has a palpable sense of the bar rising, in that, how do we, in trying to figure out, it's one thing to gain and attain some success, but it's another thing certainly to sustain it. And with the realization that, the tools and the processes that got us to where we are today are probably going to have some limited value for us going in the future, and we really need to rethink what our mission is in terms of providing insight and support for the senior leaders of our company. And so, I think the way that we think about that thematically is contributing to kind of that cultural evolution in the company, and where we start to think about, how do you demonstrate a rigor and keep that bar raised, not just for ourselves, but for the senior leaders in the company. And how do we help them do that? And one, I think, is focusing on the concept of compliance. And that when we talk about compliance, we're not talking about just regulatory compliance, but compliance with our company principles, our policies. And so there's a real focus for us today to try to figure out, it's not just, a subjective discussion about, how we think the wind is blowing today in this particular area, but really, are we really doing the work that needs to be done, that we state is necessary to our company's success? And very very much related to that is the concept of accountability. And it's one thing to be a business leader of a business that is, let's say, growing, and let's say a $500 million business at Microsoft. And then it's quite another thing to be that same leader on a business that's $10 billion. And how do you maintain a sense of accountability for that business with that leader, and in a way that is not destructive or but it is supportive? And so we're focusing a lot on that topic as well today. And then I think we talk a little bit about data. There's just data growing, at just tremendous volumes all around us, and that data has a story to tell, and we need to be able to find it and create some value out of that data. And so these are three areas that I think we kind of find ourselves deeply enmeshed in today in terms of building our risk practice, and so. Before we move on and start talking about any kind of specific topics that we focus on, I'd like to ask Kate if there are any questions about this journey from toddler to young adult that we can talk about right now.
Sure, Tom. So one question you mentioned as part of your developing stage, that you were able to change the conversation from a risk conversation to a business conversation. What were some of the tactics that you used, or the way in which you approached that conversation that made it valuable for your business colleagues to really engage in that conversation with you?
That's actually a fascinating question. A lot of what we did then and continue to do today is just soak up strategy documents and strategy information, and that's talking to leaders who are in charge of subject matter experts who are in charge of executing it, and we get feedback from the senior leaders who are really kind of captaining that part of the ship. But really just to soak up the essence of what our strategic objectives are, and not necessarily from a competitive standpoint, but what is the business objective that we're really trying to do when we launch for example, a new a program. We have, let's say, something called the Power Suite, which is Power BI and Power Apps and things like that. There are a bunch of what we might refer to as low code or no code type things where you can create an army of citizen developers, and really trying to understand how that's different from the services that we operate in the past, and what the marketplace is, and what are the things that are key to the success of that business. And so and that's just an example. We also think about in our our leaders are, I think we're quite lucky at Microsoft to have some very thoughtful leaders. We have leaders that are thinking about topics that are in these areas that are, let's say, are a horizon or years in advance, where we are identifying things and trying to manage other peers in the industry and governmental organizations to tackle and deal with things like cybersecurity, so that it doesn't become a huge mess that we just have to deal with in a more reactive way. So understanding strategy and how we can address those types of things early on, I think has been key for us.
One of the questions from the audience is related to this. And we're curious, how did you communicate the importance of that integration of risk with strategy so that everyone understood? I think sometimes when we as risk practitioners go in to talk to strategists, they sometimes give us, the Heisman, stay away, I don't want to talk about what I can't do, right? So how did you all do that communication with your stakeholders? And did you take it on yourself to say we're going to learn as much about strategy to be able to speak their language, or was it mutual?
I think we took it upon ourselves. And I'll give our newly retired chief audit executive, Melvin Flowers, a lot of credit. He, it was with his, very active encouragement that we did so. I think that, one of the things that we learned in working with a lot of these divisional risk teams is that they were really focused on, a very much of a compliance message, and we saw that not necessarily resonate or land with a lot of the business leaders. But if you were able to talk with them about how we can be successful as a company, how they could be successful, it was just a very subtle change in the way that we introduced ourselves in meetings and things. And as a team, I think each of us tries to do that in a different way. Personally, my agenda slide for most meetings that I have with senior leaders has our strategy slide embedded in it. And the way we talk about strategy at Microsoft is we've identified 8 customer solution areas, and we have those customer solution areas, our mission, some of our principles on the strategy slide, and it's a great way to level set the conversation and remind people that may not work with in the enterprise space super frequently, and so it's a great way at the beginning of the meeting just to kind of level set and make sure that everybody is understanding that what we're here to talk about. And so far it's been super helpful for me personally, and I know that some of my colleagues use this, and others prefer to just talk about it. But it's been super helpful so far.
Well, we do have some other questions, but I'm going to save those to the end. So why don't we keep going on the journey, and then as we go, I'll ask you some more.
Great. So, okay, key focus areas. So I'd like to talk and kind of pivot here and talk about, what is it that we consider important in the company. Our team covers tracks 34 risk topics, and not all classified in the same as super important or things like that, but we do have a classification system and a prioritization system. But those 34 topics kind of roughly fall into these 4 categories, and perhaps most important to them is threats to our trust formula. And not surprisingly, those would be things that pertain to information security and privacy. And more recently, we've added software and services quality and availability to that trust formula. In each one of these areas, we have a very disproportionate attention or intensity of intention in the terms of what are the drivers to these risks, because even though they are things that we invest a lot of time in, the job is never done. And so even with respect to security, the threats continue to evolve. And so the question is, what are we doing? Is it effective? Is it keeping up with the external environment? And what can we do are we doing everything that we can to address the risk near term, and as I referred to before, in the longer term? One of the benefits, I think, for the intensity of this focus on those components of our trust formula, if you want to call it that, is that with this intensity, we've been able to turn things that are preventing bad things from happening to opportunities. And we have customers now choosing us because of our dedication to security and our commitment to privacy, and hopefully, for a good reputation for being reliable and available for the service when you need it. With the quality and availability being the newer one, I'll just share some of the things that we're doing in that area in particular. The size of our cloud has gotten so big that it's kind of exceeded the human capacity to monitor it in any kind of acceptable time frame. And so we're developing tools to understand this very heterogeneous cloud environment that has Linux servers, Windows servers in it, and it's got all kinds of customer adaptations running on multiple operating systems and hardware SKUs, and so we're developing software agents to monitor that operating environment, and if they see conditions that in the past have resulted in a disruption to a customer, that we make the changes and move them off these virtual machines or off these clusters into a new one proactively. We're also and should an outage occur, these same automated agents then can automatically detect the outage and initiate response activities faster than what a human might be able to do. So a lot of time and energy has been focused on building some very strong capabilities in this area, and we look to see the fruits of that coming in the near future. Talk a little bit about our strategic risks. Our history comes as a purveyor of software. We would give people diskettes or CDs, and our mission was a computer on every desk. Today, we are operators of services on behalf of our customers, and our mission is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more, not to just do what they did yesterday, but to achieve more. And so that the nuanced changes there are significant to us in terms of what our strategies are, what our missions are, what we consider success. And essentially, it's moving from kind of a license business model based on licensing to a business model based on customer consumption, and customers don't consume if it doesn't work for them. So we are much more partnered now in our customer success and building up that capability in terms of not just having people that do relationship selling, but are actually able to help a customer architect a digital transformation, are big things that are key components of our mitigations in these areas. And so that takes a fair amount of attention, and we've got a fair good group of people there that are laser dialed into that. I want to talk a little bit about digital transformation enabling growth, and I'll share this as a tale of two scenarios in the same company on the same day. One of the more recent cloud services that we announced in the last years is something called Sentinel. And what Sentinel does is it essentially it's crowdsourcing for security purposes. And what it does is it's a function that monitors and tracks and reasons over 8 trillion signals a day from our ecosystem. 8 trillion signals per day. And in that 8 trillion is a fair amount of insight in terms of what customer is being attacked, on what type of platform, in what geographic zone, by whom, things like that. And what Sentinel is able to do is to take that data, reason over it, and act on it for our greater customers' behalf and our benefit. And it's just been tremendously popular. We do have integrations with third-party products and things like that participate in this as well into the signal stream. And just a tremendously interesting project, and born in the cloud. It's really one of the first native cloud security incident and event management applications. At the same time, we have a chief economist that I talked to very recently, and who was sharing with me his frustration in that he was asking one of his data scientists to talk to answer a question for him about what was the correlation between outages and classes of outages and customer behavior. And he said he had to wait days to get the answer because of siloed data, whether it's that came from 3 or 4 data sources, had to be normalized, reconciled, put in there, and then reasoned over. And so our digital transformation for all of Sentinel's success is still very nascent, and we have a lot to do in this area. To be able to operate at a higher standard and to be more helpful to our customers in enabling their growth. Last, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the things that we've done in our, what we might call our ESG area, or in terms of our company's growing commitment to social responsibility. And there are a number of things that we do across a broad category of topics. I want to talk to maybe about 3 of those today. First that we have is one that we call Defending Democracy, and it's our commitment to the democratic process, not only in the United States but across the globe. And really, there's probably 3 things that are meaningful for this conversation in that area. One is our participation in 2019 in support of the Paris Call around organizing organizations internationally around the importance of cybersecurity and norms in that area. We also introduced some program called Account Guard, An account guard is essentially an advanced account protection that we offer for free to people involved in the democratic process, whether they're running for election, things like that. And we offer the some advanced protection for those people so that people's accounts couldn't be hacked or things like that. And also, I think recently we've extended that to healthcare as part of a COVID response and the support of people working on solutions to this pandemic. The last one is actually kind of interesting as well, particularly in this election year, which is some software that we developed and within Microsoft Research, in that we've now ported to open source to allow the bigger community to improve on it. And software we call Election Guard, and it's essentially automation that modernizes elections platforms for state and local state and local governments that are responsible for managing the election process. And it was made with the idea that there could be mail-in voting, and that everybody would be able to see that that vote counted and be able to verify that their vote was counted in the way that they desired. We ran a pilot with Election Guard in Wisconsin earlier in March, and it went reasonably well. And we're hoping to build on some of that foundation going forward. The other area that we are focused on from a social responsibility standpoint is responsible AI, and there's a lot written about artificial intelligence, and certainly our company with our distribution model, meaning that we sell technology that to other partners and customers that then use it to achieve their goals, makes this a complicated topic. But we started by trying to anchor ourselves in 6 foundational principles, which include fairness, inclusivity, reliability and safety, security and privacy, all built on kind of a foundation of transparency or explainability and accountability. And we're in the process as a company now of trying to be able to take those principles and make sure that they're well grounded and with everyone in the company, from at least a conceptual standpoint, and then more specifically with those people that are actually on the front lines and developing and distributing this technology. And so we're building up a series of champs and a bunch of the engineering networks that work very closely with we have a couple of governance organizations that we have to monitor our developments there. And then lastly, I'd like to talk about some of the things that we're doing with respect to sustainability. It's I think easy and certainly one could get somewhat cynical by looking at nice, highly produced commercials about things that organizations are doing to protect the environment, and certainly we've all seen those. A couple of things that we've done is and some things that we track as an ERM team in terms of our progress to our public commitments, and some of those with respect to sustainability are that we will be carbon negative, a company, not carbon neutral, but carbon negative by the year 2030. And then from a lifetime offset, meaning we will remove, using that carbon negative profile, we will offset all of the carbon that Microsoft has produced in its corporate lifetime by 2050. And so we track our progress on that, what people are doing, who's accountable, are we making the progress that we need to achieve those ends. We also recently introduced and set aside $1 billion to organizations in the form of grants for climate innovation, recognizing that we can't do this ourselves, that we have perhaps a platform that people can use to achieve some of these goals, and really are focused on that. A big area that we've used that is in what we all call AI for Good, where we've spent helping people deal with agricultural challenges and things of that nature, and has been one area where that climate innovation money has been spent. And then lastly, the concept of alternative energy sources is probably not new to anyone, but as a company that has a growing footprint of data centers, which are big energy users, this is not an insignificant topic. We are very committed to functioning on 100% renewable energy sources by the year 2025. And so again, from an ERM standpoint, one of the things that we look at is, it's a public commitment. It very much impacts our reputation and perhaps even our trust. And are we making the progress in these areas that we need to make? So these are some areas that we focus on. I think, Kate, maybe this is another good place to stop to see if people have questions about these particular areas or any other risk topic that in terms of the content and not the journey, that we could talk about.
Sure. So one of the questions from the audience here is, how seriously does Microsoft take into account corporate social responsibility into its ERM program?
I would say pretty seriously. I have some colleagues that are very passionate about it, and I'm smiling as I think about them. They are, for example, just yesterday, one of my colleagues banned me because she wants me to set up a meeting with her to and the person that does decommissioning of servers, and with, not to get too technical, but the decommissioning of a data-bearing device is kind of a complicated thing in terms of you may have contractual relationships with customers or governments around destruction of data that may be on these disk drives in particular, and what she's trying to do is talk to them about other alternatives to that destruction of that hardware, so that it doesn't go into back into the environment in a bad way. And so we have people that are not only focused just even on the high level stuff and managing our commitments to the public in some of these big what we'll call enterprise level public commitments, but also in trying to understand the nuts and bolts of no pun intended, of how we do this on an everyday basis.
Another question really is around, and this is probably a really big question, but how is cloud risk managed at Microsoft?
Well, we don't really, one of the things that is very interesting in terms of our practice is that we make a very clear distinction between what we call risk drivers and risks. And what I would say is, there are things that we'll call in talking with other companies, they'll have perhaps a geopolitical risk, but we kind of see that as a driver that impacts broadly across our portfolio of topics that we track. And I would have to say, put maybe, managing cloud risk is perhaps one of those where it's considered a driver that impacts broadly. Certainly, the elements of our trust formula are very much a part of a customer-centric view of cloud risk. We also are very thoughtful in many respects around how we even think about security, for example. Instead of having just one big cyber risk, we've broken it out into several parts. One is, how do we protect Microsoft and its IP and our employees? But then we have another risk with other executive accountability about how do we protect our customers. And I think it's through these lens that we apply in each one of these topical areas is how we solve that cloud risk question. But it's a fascinating question.
It is. Well, I think we have about 10 minutes left, and I think we've got one more slide, and then I can jump into a couple of other questions.
Great. Come on, slide.
There we go.
There we go. Okay. So as we look forward, we, as an organization, we, faced with a company that has been successful and that expectations continue to increase, we look at how can we get better as well. And part of this is, and the list you see here probably is not earth-shattering news or anything like that, but we've tried to focus on a number of things so that we can be impactful and deliver some impactful outcomes. And first of that starts with having better integration. And this is something perhaps that we share in common in the private sector, or certainly at Microsoft and in the public sector. And it starts even within our own group. We've identified information and process silos. And those things don't really come around as a result of somebody wanting to, exert more power, but it's that traditional tension between efficiency. If I got to get from here to there, and I'm going to create my own artifacts, my own data sources, my own source of truth, and that I can be quite more assured of getting from here to there and with a certain amount of resources in the timetable that people are expecting, versus working more collaboratively, sharing common sources of truth, and having that more collaborative approach. And so what we're trying to do is trying to find ways to make that more collaborative approach more efficient. And part of that are things that you might normally expect in terms of having cross groups working on data architectures and things like that, where we can really focus on delivering those outcomes. We have helped senior leaders in the board there. It's not like we haven't been doing that, but in our particular case, we've had a wholesale change in governance at Microsoft. A new leader of our enterprise risk team, a new chief audit exec, and changes in the board, where the head of the audit committee now is new, that being Hugh Johnson of the current CFO of PepsiCo. And early on in Hugh's tenure, he he shared some comments with our team, and one I thought was pretty interesting, which is, with all of the data that exists today, and the capabilities and the understandings and the context that you guys work on to deliver, and he said, you have a tremendous amount of information. However, don't tell me everything you can tell me. Tell me what I need to know. And that's hard. That's almost like the Mark Twain saying of, I'm sorry this letter is so long. If I had more time, it would be shorter. But it's we've got to really think about, how we best help the senior leaders in the company, and not necessarily tell them everything that they could or may want to know, but what they need to know. And so that requires some concentrated thought and some experimentation, frankly, around trying some things and seeing how they fly. I was able to listen to the ending of the first session, and I heard a little bit about some talk about the impact of COVID and things like that. One of the things that we identified as a company and as an ERM organization is that we can be more organizationally agile. A lot of traditional risk practices are based on what we might call probable worst case scenarios, so that we're not getting executives to opine on the meteor hitting the data center, so to speak. But what we're trying to do now is expand from that and think of ways where we systematically can assess our readiness for what we might call high impact, low likelihood events, and without trying to turn the discussion in a super maybe unhelpful way, but to make sure that the principles by which we assess our readiness for these types of events are at least considered, and that there is a playbook by which how we might respond. And so we're working on that to figure out how best to consider what those things are. Certainly, the world is pretty good at giving us examples, but and then how do we prioritize and make that a productive conversation in the business? And then I think that the last thing that we're doing, we talked a little bit about the role of data and how sometimes we're able to harness it, sometimes we're not, how we have these data silos. But one of the things that, obviously we'll be working on those, but the point I wanted to make here was that we need to figure out how to use data to tell the story, and that's not necessarily just cramming it into an Excel sheet that's got a zillion rows and maybe less than a zillion columns, and that is in 4-point font, but it is trying to use that data to help and support the executive conversation. And it's interesting. We had some feedback from one of our executive vice presidents recently that said, I really agree with your the conclusion and on this topic. I think you guys nailed it. However, I don't see how you support it. And so it really kind of called into question, how do we support that with data that makes that something that gives our senior leaders some assurance that yes, that this is something that should be seriously considered, or that supports a viewpoint that we're proposing that they consider. So these are some of the areas that we're focused on to make ourselves better going forward, and I'm sure there will be more as time goes on. But this is really the end of my prepared discussion. So again, I want to thank Kate and all of you, and I'm happy to take some questions.
One topic of questions has come up multiple times, and could you elaborate a little bit more on how Microsoft differentiates between risk driver and risk?
Super. One of the well, I'll take one that is a topic, a current topic. We were in conversations recently, and someone said, China should be a risk, and we thought, no. China is a driver. It's really reflective of a volatile geopolitical driver, not just that country in and of itself. And it impacts these areas. And because one of the premises in how we kind of sort between those two is there an accountable executive that you can point to who's responsible for that? So who's responsible for China? And that helps us sort through what is a driver and what is what we might call a risk area, or a topic that we need to focus on and really understand our ability to be to control our destiny in that area.
Another question here: how do you onboard new leaders to the value of ERM? So do you have a standard meeting with everybody, or are they all really different?
I think they're different. One of the so we haven't had a tremendous amount of change in the senior most leadership of the company. Certainly, I guess the big one would be the onboarding of LinkedIn. But that was kind of a special circumstance in that we have kind of a loose governance arrangement with them, where the Jeff Weiner and his executive team really were given some very a lot of independence, as long as we kind of agreed on principles. And so that integration took over, in terms of them integrating into our ERM process, I would say over a couple of years. And but where we have more, I guess, changes in executive structures in what we would call our corporate vice president layer. At Microsoft, we probably have in excess of 200 or so corporate vice presidents. And we meet with them twice a year as a group, not all at one time, but in small groups, twice a year. And inevitably, you have someone who's coming into the company new, or someone who's been promoted. And certainly there's a process where we kind of we meet with their chief of staff, kind of explain the program, and then at that point decide whether we need to have a more formal onboarding with them, or do we have or is that something that the chief of staff feels that they're equipped to do, and then we again start that meeting with at least the ones that I participate in with that strategy side to help level set, and then over a period of time you have higher expectations of what the outcomes are of those meetings. But it's a good question. I mean, we've actually spent time onboarding new board members as well, and in terms of, because each or even while they may be on other boards, everybody kind of practices enterprise risk management a little differently, and so we do have materials that we've used in the past that are kind of very dedicated to that purpose.
Excellent. Thanks, Tom. I want to ask one final question that I think is really specific to you. What risks do you see relating to artificial intelligence? I think the use of them, as the use of artificial intelligence, as well as how ERM could potentially use artificial intelligence to get better information about potential risks?
That's an interesting question, since I was asked to write a paper for RIMS on some of this. It's at LinkedIn if you care. But seriously, artificial intelligence is not one of these binary things where you walk in the room, you flip a switch, and now if it's on the light, the room is super bright. It's one of these things where you are in it and you're trying to wrestle with data and reason over data. And some of the artificial intelligence that really exists today are really more around machine learning and all of that. It's certainly things that we've talked about with respect to quality and availability can be applied to Microsoft. And I've talked a little bit about that in terms of us being able to harness data, and even just the data that's around us, not even looking at the terabytes of data that we collect on a regular basis from an engineering standpoint. I think that as we think about risks with respect to artificial intelligence, a lot of it has to do with our distribution model, frankly, in that sense that we can build things and we have a fair amount of control in terms of building those and complying with our 6 principles. But as that technology gets out into the hands of partners and other customers, or even governments, what happens when there is a use that kind of conflicts with our principles, and how are we ready, and do we have a principled thought about how do we respond to that? And so those are some of the things that we think about in terms of the use. It's one of those things where you're in the pot and the water gets warmer, and pretty soon your artificial intelligence is all around you. But we're not at that point yet, and so we're really trying to focus on the risks that we think can materialize today. And really, I think a big part of it is focused on how do we kind of keep an eye on the ecosystem, and not be the parent of an artificial intelligence monster.
Tom, thank you. I know for me, I found the conversation fascinating and really appreciate you sharing the journey that Microsoft has been on. I know that everyone virtually will join me in a nice round of applause for Tom, and thank you so much for joining us so early in the morning from the West Coast. We definitely appreciate
from smoky
that.
Seattle.
That's right. So with that, everyone, thank you very much for attending our plenary session. As previously mentioned, you can stay right on this link for the next 2 sessions. We are very thankful for our sponsors, and we'll be playing our sponsor video once again. And please join us back here at 11:45 for our next session. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Iris Intelligence is proud to sponsor AFERM and welcome you to the 13th Annual ERM Summit. Iris has been providing web-based risk management software to federal government customers for almost 15 years. Our software systems embed and support robust frameworks for managing risk with products that are quick and easy to install. offering a high level of configuration to ensure these frameworks are matched to the specific processes that are right for you. Whether you are working as a small team or integrating many hundreds of users across multiple locations, Iris Intelligence Risk Software will enhance your ERM initiative by helping to identify more risks, applying a consistent assessment framework, implementing cost-effective mitigation strategies, and automating reporting to your senior stakeholders. Iris firmly supports AFERM in its mission to advance the practice of ERM in the federal government. With Iris, you will encourage and enhance risk communication in your team and develop a risk-aware culture. Contact us today to discover how we can help you.
Hello, this is Paul Marshall, Vice President at the MIL Corporation. I'm also an AFERM volunteer supporting AFERM's podcast, Risk Chats. I'm here today to provide you a short overview of MIL's approach to ERM. At MIL, we support ERM programs by helping agencies identify and manage the data they need to mitigate risk. Government agencies have access to vast stores of information, but the data needs to be organized, categorized, and properly analyzed to identify those outliers, trends, and patterns that are indicators of risk. Now, just as important as the data itself is a need to clearly present this information to decision makers. MIL helps clients build integrated dashboards that can visually display at one glance what 1,000 words can't say. Additionally, MIL uses tools such as robotics process automation, AI, machine learning to automate data gathering and analysis, providing connections between data sets that bring to light novel and unexpected correlations and trends. So if you want to learn more about MIL and our approach to ERM, please visit us at our virtual booth in the Solutions Hall. Thank you and enjoy the summit.
Hello everybody, thank you for taking the time to listen to me talk a little bit about our firm, which is RMA Associates. We are a growing CPA and consulting firm that's focused on the federal marketplace. Our growth and our success is a testament to our people, our processes, the use of our technology.
Okay, everyone, there was an echo. If one of you guys are on here, can you please mute yourself? Those that are accessing through a panelist or dialing in, we are hearing some kind of background. So go ahead and mute yourself if you've dialed in. I'm going to give you guys a few more seconds to mute yourselves. I'm hearing a Windows pop up on somebody's screen. Okay, so let's go ahead and try to replay that video again to see if this time it will stop the echoing. Okay, thank you.
Iris Intelligence is proud to sponsor AFERM and welcome you to the 13th Annual ERM Summit. Iris has been providing web-based risk management software to federal government customers for almost 15 years. Our software systems embed and support robust frameworks for managing risk with products that are quick and easy to install, offering a high level of configuration to ensure these frameworks are matched to the specific processes that are right for you. Whether you are working as a small team or integrating many hundreds of users across multiple locations, Iris Intelligence Risk Software will enhance your ERM initiative by helping to identify more risks, applying a consistent assessment framework, implementing cost-effective mitigation strategies, and automating reporting to your senior stakeholders. Iris firmly supports AFERM in its mission to advance the practice of ERM in the federal government. With Iris, you will encourage and enhance risk communication in your team and develop a risk-aware culture. Contact us today to discover how we can help you.
Hello, this is Paul Marshall, Vice President at the MIL Corporation. I'm also an AFERM volunteer supporting AFERM's podcast, Risk Chats. I'm here today to provide you a short overview of MIL's approach to ERM. At MIL, we support ERM programs by helping agencies identify and manage the data they need to mitigate risk. Government agencies have access to vast stores of information, but the data needs to be organized, categorized, and properly analyzed to identify those outliers, trends, and patterns that are indicators of risk. Now, just as important as the data itself is a need to clearly present this information to decision makers. MIL helps clients build integrated dashboards that can visually display in one glance what 1,000 words can't say. Additionally, MIL uses tools such as robotics process automation, AI, machine learning to automate data gathering and analysis, providing connections between data sets that bring to light novel and unexpected correlations and trends. So if you want to learn more about MIL and our approach to ERM, please visit us at our virtual booth in the Solutions Hall. Thank you and enjoy the summit.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me talk a little bit about our firm, which is RMA Associates. We are a growing CPA and consulting firm that's focused on the federal marketplace. Our growth and our success is a testament to our people, our processes, the use of our technology, our agility, and our methodologies, which really focuses on listening first and foremost. Listening to our clients, and then taking the complex and simplifying it so that it's easy to understand, and then delivering high quality deliverables that go through our exhaustive quality control process to meet and exceed client expectations. Our CPAR's reviews have been excellent, and we continue to grow and continue to do better. We appreciate your time. If you would like to know more about us, please look at our virtual booth online. Thank you so much.
Help protect your family with group term life insurance tailored to fit your needs. WAEPA has been ensuring the future of civilian federal employees for more than 75 years. Learn more at waepa.org.
Welcome to the AFERM 2020 Virtual Summit. I'm Sean O'Rourke, President of Pro Concepts, and one of the many sponsors that are bringing you the summit today. Throughout the summit, you'll exchange information with other participants, with sponsors, and partners. We invite you to come down to the virtual solution hall, where all the sponsors and partners will be exhibiting information about the services they can provide your organization. Stop by the Pro Concepts booth and we'll provide you information about our risk management services, assessments, and our software product called RiskRadar Enterprise. RiskRadar Enterprise is an easy-to-use, intuitive application, flexible and scalable to any organization size. Come on down, we'll see you, and we'll have a great exchange of information available for you. We'll be ready to chat with you at any moment of time. Goodbye for now.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us at the AFERM Summit. Crow is proud to be an AFERM sponsor and participating in today's summit. Crow is a technology, consulting, and CPA firm. We're the 9th largest CPA firm in the U.S. and have been providing services to public sector agencies for over 45 years. Crow's public sector practice does work with all levels of government, including federal agencies and state and local governments. We assist agencies with enterprise risk management, governance, risk and compliance tools, internal controls, grants management, auditing, regulatory compliance, and cybersecurity. Crow has a proven track record of client satisfaction with an industry-leading 90% client engagement index. We hope you're enjoying today's summit, and for more information, or just to say hello, please stop by our virtual booth for a chat. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ann Everts, AGA's Chief Executive Officer, and we are excited to support AFERM's annual ERM training event this year. If you're not familiar with AGA, our more than 14,000 members are all dedicated professionals working in federal, state, and local governments, as well as academia and the private sector. AGA's members work in all areas of financial management, including accounting, auditing, budgeting, performance management, acquisition, grants management, and yes, even IT. We help our members boost their careers through AGA educational events and opportunities that include live and on-demand virtual training. You can even prepare to earn your Certified Government Financial Manager designation, our premier certification program. We offer many opportunities throughout the year to engage, not only in the Washington, D.C. area, but also at our 85 chapters located across the country. Check us out at www.agacgfm.org. We'd love to get you engaged with AGA. To enjoy today's event and stay healthy, safe, and stay connected. Enjoy your day.
Hi, I'm Andrew Goldschmidt, the Executive Director of the National Grants Management Association, NGMA. We're the premier association for grants management professionals. We have more than 2,300 members. We've grown actually more than 400 members over the past year. We're excited for the opportunity to share the many benefits and professional development resources that NGMA offers to help with any aspect of grants management and further enhance your career. We offer in-depth understanding of the full grants life cycle, soup to nuts grants management body of knowledge training, and that's offered virtually, and a nationally recognized industry credential, the CGMS, the Certified Grants Management Specialist designation. We even offer monthly live grants management virtual learning with CPAs included in specialized knowledge. And we also are excited to be here with you here at the 13th Annual AFERM Summit training. So we'll see you in the Virtual Solutions Hall. We hope you'll stop by to the NGMA virtual booth.
We are honored to join you at the AFERM Summit as a new community partner. The FAIR Institute's mission is to help risk professionals like you to manage cybersecurity and operational risk from the financial perspective, in dollars and cents. Our 9,000 members leverage the FAIR standard as a common risk taxonomy and analytics model to allow them to more accurately and consistently scope, assess, manage, and report cybersecurity and operational risk, and enable cost-effective decision-making. FAIR can help you better meet the requirements for assessing cyber risk in financial terms and integrating it with your ERM program, as outlined by the Executive Order on Cybersecurity, the NIST Cybersecurity Framework and its special publications, and OMB Circular A123. Please visit our website at fairinstitute.org for more information and consider joining the very active FAIR Institute Government Chapter. Thank you and have a great summit.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for your patience and that technical difficulty there, but hopefully you were able to see and hear the sponsor greetings. Meredith, go ahead. It's your floor.
Great. Thanks, Kia. Welcome back. Another great plenary session. Tom articulated Microsoft's key focus areas in his ERM path towards maturity. I learned about environmental, social, and governance risk areas. And I think the audience asked some really great questions for Tom, and I'm happy that the attendees are taking advantage of the opportunities that the summit brings to you to gain access to knowledgeable ERM leaders. Please also take advantage of the access you have to AFERM's partners and sponsors. You can initiate a web chat to learn more about their services. Please go check out the Virtual Solutions Hall, and you can find that on a link to it on the AFERM webpage. I'm pleased to introduce Kate Silvis again, for her to present the results of the annual ERM survey. Kate, the floor is yours.
Okay, I think you're still muted. Let me see here. Okay, you're good?
I'm good. Can you hear me now?
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
No problem. So I get to introduce again. Well, good morning again, Summit. I am very excited to be presenting you with the results of this year's AFERM Guidehouse Federal ERM Survey on the state of the ERM practice across the federal government. If we could advance the slide. And once more. So our agenda for today will be to cover the approach that was taken for the survey, give you some insight into who the responding organizations are, walk through some of the primary demographic breakdowns, give you additional top findings, and then walk you through how you will be able to visualize the survey once you get access to it. Next slide, please. This is the 6th annual survey conducted by Guidehouse and AFERM on the state of ERM in the federal government. The survey was available for response from May 11th through May 20th of this year, and members of AFERM, the Senior Executive Association, as well as the Association of Government Accountants were invited to respond. As in previous years, only government employees were invited to respond. Next slide. This year, we have the broadest coverage of the organizational base in the 6-year history of the survey. Responses were received from a total of 37 federal organizations, including all 15 cabinet agencies again this year. In many of these cases, additional variety was represented across multiple components and bureaus of these departments or agencies. And this year, for the first time, the results that you will see in the survey will also include the components and bureaus that provided information. Next slide. This year, we have 8 demographic breakdowns. The first shown here is whether or not the agency has a formal ERM program. And this year, as you can see, 83% of respondents indicate working in an agency that has a formal ERM program. And this is up from 77% last year. And it's the highest level of ERM adoption in the history of our survey. The next demographic breakdown is the size of the organization. And for purposes of the data analysis that you will see in the survey, we break the organizational size into 2 categories. Small, which represents organizations with less than 10,000 employees, and large, which represents organizations with more than 10,000 employees. This year's survey respondents include 63% of organizations that have less than 10,000 employees, and then the remaining 36 would be considered large agencies. The next demographic grouping is the duration of your ERM program. And this represents how long the ERM program has been in place. Only 3% of respondents this year indicate establishing a new ERM program in the past year, which continues our trend of fewer and fewer new ERM programs as adoption has really been realized across a vast majority of the federal government. And for the 2nd year in a row, we see respondents indicating a jump into the 5 to 10 year category. That features 28% of respondents compared with 20% of respondents in the previous year. Approximately a quarter of our respondents indicate they do not know the answer to this question, and that's similar to the percentage that responded last year. The next category in this first column is the size of the ERM budget. Budgets for federal ERM programs continue to remain small, with 56% of respondents reporting their organization spends $250,000 or less on its ERM program. Last year, 70% of respondents noted that their organization spent less than $1 million on its ERM program, and this year, that number increased by 20% to 84% of respondents indicating that they spend less than $1 million on their ERM program. Moving to the second column, the next demographic breakdown is who the leader of the ERM program is. And this year, responses were virtually unchanged from 2019. The percentage of federal ERM programs led by a chief risk officer has remained nearly the same at 45% for each of the last 4 years. One notable change in the response to this question was that there was a move away from the response type of other. Just over a quarter of respondents selected other, which is down from 38% last year. The responses broke down into several categories that we were able to aggregate. 29% wrote in risk management titles other than CRO, and those included titles such as Director of ERM, Director of Risk, ERM, and ERM Officer. 21% of the other category wrote in strategic planning or performance titles, including Strategic and ERM Lead, Director Strategic Planning, Director Strategic Planning and Performance, and Director of Policy, Strategic Planning and Risk Management. And 13% wrote in quality assurance titles, including Quality Assurance Division Lead, Quality Assurance, and Quality of Performance and Risk. Who the ERM lead reports to. This year's survey indicates a significant decrease in the percentage of ERM program leads who report directly to the agency head or the deputy. Specifically this year, only 35% of respondents indicate that they report to the head of their agency or the deputy. This year, COO and CFO have equal percentages of reporting programs at 23% each. Organizations whose ERM program is led by a CRO are nearly twice as likely to report directly to the agency head or deputy than those programs that are led by someone else. And larger organizations are also more likely for their ERM program to report directly to the head of the agency or deputy than smaller organizations. The amount of time an ERM leader spends on ERM. Many ERM program leaders also have other duties. This year's respondents report only 17% spend more than 75% of their time focusing on the ERM program. This is down from 30% a year ago, which is a 41% reduction. On the other end of the spectrum, similar to last year, 40% spend less than 25% of their time focusing on the ERM program. This dynamic even affects programs run by chief risk officers. According to our respondents, 23% of CROs spend more than 75% of their time on the ERM program. While this is still greater than the overall percent in this category of time allocation, it's nearly 50% lower than a year ago, when 45% of CROs were reported to spend more than 75% of their time on the ERM program. For program leads with titles other than CRO, only 13% spend 75% of their time on the ERM program, while 53% spend less than 25% of their time dedicated to ERM. ERM leaders who report directly to the agency head or deputy appear to have the most competing demands for their time. Only 13% of these leaders spend more than 75% of their time focusing on ERM, while more than half spend less than 25% of their time on ERM. ERM program leaders from agencies with longer duration ERM programs have more dedicated time than agencies with shorter duration ERM programs. For the longer duration programs, 23% of leaders spend more than 75% of their time on ERM, compared to 10% of leaders spending more than 75% of their time for the shorter duration program. And our last demographic category is whether or not ERM is included in the SES performance plan. This year, there was a significant decrease in the number of respondents who reported federal organizations incorporating a specific evaluation of ERM or risk management related activities in the performance plans of its senior leaders. This dropped from 26% last year to 12% this year. The figure rises to 55% when considering at least some of the organization's SES, which is just shy of last year's combined results of 60%. And the responses are similar for respondents from the SES group themselves. Next slide, please. In previous surveys, we highlighted the demographic categories that had the highest correlation with the success of an ERM program. We do see that trend continue this year with these 4 specific demographic categories. The first 2 had the highest mean scores and the most positive responses from respondents. Those are organizations that incorporate risk management into the performance plans of all members of the Senior Executive Service, and organizations with ERM programs that have been running for 3 or more years. We had an additional 2 demographic categories that had higher correlation for ERM effectiveness, but not quite as high as the previous 2. And those are organizations in which the ERM program reports directly to the agency head or deputy, and organizations with a CRO in charge of the ERM program. Next slide, please. And the next slide. This year, given the current environment, we added questions to the survey relating to agencies' responses to COVID-19. With COVID changing the context in which organizations operate, we wanted to understand from the community how ERM has been engaged in the agency's response to the pandemic, as well as steps that might be taken in order to address these types of high impact, low likelihood risks in the future. So in the new question, 50% of respondents indicate that their ERM program has been extremely engaged or highly engaged in their organization's response to the pandemic. And that figure surges to 85% when including those that are somewhat engaged. If you could change the slide, please. We asked an open-ended question around what types of changes might be incorporated into the ERM program or into the risk profile as a result of COVID. 64% of respondents indicated that they are going to include changes, and those responses are grouped into these following categories. Focus on business continuity, identifying COVID-19 risks and updating risk descriptions and risk scoring, changing the risk assessment process itself, an increased focus on risk responses, a focus on Black Swan disaster risks, and a focus on resilience. We can move to the next slide, please. There is a noticeable uptick in the percent of organizations that have a defined risk appetite statement. 46% this year compared with 36% a year ago. But the percentage that are communicated throughout the organization and integrated into strategy and decision making remains one of the lowest results from this year's survey at only 9%. This year, commensurate with an increase in the use of risk appetite statements, organizations with ERM programs led by a CRO indicate the existence of risk appetite 66% of the time. This is more than double the 29% for organizations with non-CRO-led programs. And similarly, organizations with longer duration ERM indicate this level of adoption of risk appetite statements 57% of the time, compared to 43% for organizations with shorter duration ERM. If we can switch to the next slide. And advance one more time, please. Thank you. One of the most impactful improvements that was identified as part of this year's survey was more clear linkage, alignment, and integration of risk with strategy and performance. And as you can see from this graphic, there still is some additional enhancement that we can do as a community around the integration of ERM into these topics. Two of our categories here, management of internal control programs and integration with strategic planning, have moved up to either the mean or to the midline or above the midline of 3.0, which is very exciting. And in addition, the additional two categories, performance management and execution oversight, as well as integration with budgetary processes, have also increased to this year. If we can move to the next slide, please. Moving on to the risk focus and perceptions of risk. As you can see from the top 5 listings here, there's a high correlation across these categories for several risk types, specifically cybersecurity and privacy risk. It shows up as number 1 in all 3 of these categories: management's current focus on risk, the perception of risk that's currently believed to have the greatest impact on strategic objectives, as well as the perception of risk that is anticipated to have the greatest impact on strategic objectives. You can see that there is similarity across the 5 categories, or the 5 slots, the top 5 in each one of these categories. And I will say that the responses are nearly identical to last year. There are slight differences, and I will allow you to explore what those differences are when you get access to the survey, and I will not go into them right now. And we can move to the next slide. For those of you that have seen the survey before, we include a graphic representation here of the difference between the current focus, the current perception, and what the anticipated impact of these risks are. And in some of these categories, there is definitely a difference between the amount of activity that's being expended currently versus the perception and the anticipated perception of the impact of those risks. And in each one of these cases, there is the opportunity for a potential misalignment of resources. And so some of the examples here where we see from a respondent perspective the difference between current and perception is in compliance risk, financial risk, and fraud risk that you can see here on this page. And then if we switch to the next slide, the 4th category here that has kind of an outsized differential between these 3 is reporting risk. And so this is another area for you to look at as you have access to the survey. If we can switch to the next slide, please. Another question that we always ask is, what benefits is the community receiving from ERM? The enhanced management decision-making by utilizing data and information produced by enterprise risk management remains the most common benefit realized by organizations since introducing their ERM program. And this has been the top category for all 6 years of the survey. The prominence of this benefit continues to increase. Reduced duplication in risk assessment and/or compliance activities stays in the number 2 spot. And prevented significant negative event from occurring increases this year almost 30%, almost 100%, to 30 from 17. And it's just 1% off of the highest mark for this category in the history of the survey. One of the write-in responses in the other category this year is better development of strategic and performance plans, aligning with the integration scores in this year's survey. As we can see, agencies are receiving benefits from their ERM program, as evidenced here by the fact that only 4% of respondents selected none as in terms of benefits received. And this is for the 2nd year in a row. If we can switch to the next slide, please. and just one. This year's survey shows similar responses to the prior year in terms of the most impactful improvements that organizations can make to better position themselves to respond to risks. More clear linkage, alignment, or integration of risk with strategy and performance, cited by 48% of respondents, is still number one on the list. Moving up one spot from last year into position number 2 is culture change to accept risk as part of day-to-day business administration. Shown at the top, executive support for risk management moves to the number 3 position this year. It was selected by 42% of respondents. And well-established risk identification and assessment process remains in the top 4 spots. The rank order responses from demographic groups were not homogeneous this year, and I will allow you again to go and explore the survey to look at what the differences were across the demographic groups. The rank order of barriers confronting federal organizations over their ERM program remains the same as last year, but the significance of the barriers have decreased across the board. And the top 3 barriers are bridging silos across the organization, rigid culture and resistance to change, and executive level buy-in and support. There are some fairly interesting differences from a demographic perspective as to the barriers. And again, I'm not going to go into detail on those because you get to see them when you get access to the survey. If we can move to the next slide, please. One of the aspects relating to the culture questions in the survey this year is that in almost all cases, the culture scores decreased with the exception of one question. But as you can see from this graphic, looking at year-over-year information, they may have decreased, but they remain relatively stable, kind of in the same range. And so that really is an indication that these culture questions might be kind of stabilizing in this range. And so something for us to look at again next year when we do the survey. If we could just move to the next slide. I want to just show you an example of what you will see when you look at the survey responses. So similar to last year, but in a slightly different rendering, you can see the answer to the question that shows the years selected 2020 and 2019. For those questions that use the Likert scale, we've included the mean. We've included noteworthy breakout categories again this year for those that had a significant difference between the two kind of choices categories. And then also we've included the means table for all of the breakout categories this year as well as last year. Because we're not all together, we reimagined the survey this year. We have included a website rendering rather than a hard copy version of the survey. And included in the dashboard is going to be your ability to actually break out all of these tables by demographic category. In the past, we've not been able to include all of that data due to the amount of space that we had to deliver. And so we just delivered this year and last year's information. But really, you have an interactive ability to go in and look at the dashboard and the data for the last 2 years based on the demographic category that you are interested in. This means that we've gone from approximately 50 visualizations to over 350 visualizations that you can see as you walk through the dashboard. Because of that, I really want to take the opportunity to thank the Guidehouse team, David Fisher, Sarah Choi, Nellie Harden, and Anita Warner for their diligence in reviewing the data of all of those different visualizations to ensure that you have a quality representation of the differences by demographic category for the last 2 years. I think that you'll see that our speakers this afternoon are going to cover topics that came out of the survey or that you have represented interest in or differences in, and I hope you enjoy the speakers this afternoon. A link to the survey dashboard is going to be sent immediately following this presentation, and so I hope that you spend time on the dashboard. Look at different demographic categories and see what interests you. Come back and ask us questions. Our contact information for myself and Nicole are included in this presentation. We're happy to answer any questions that you have about the survey. Meredith, with that, I'll hand it back to you for the rest of the afternoon.
Thank you, Kate. You shared great takeaways from the ERM survey jointly conducted by Guidehouse and AFERM. It's terrific that 37 organizations completed the survey to get that broad look of ERM across the government. It certainly was a large amount of data, and I too appreciate the Guidehouse's team to synthesize and provide visual charts and graphs. I think the top findings were really interesting, especially the part with the highest level of ERM adoption. It's very promising. I 100% agree that ERM is a change initiative and culture is a big factor. So with that, we'll move on to our next agenda item. I'm pleased to introduce the AFERM Award Ceremony hosted by Deloitte.
Good afternoon and welcome to the 6th annual AFERM Award Ceremony sponsored by Deloitte. My name is Cynthia Vitters and I lead Deloitte's Government and Public Services Enterprise Risk Management practice. Our practice supports federal government agencies in the design, implementation, maturation, and enhancement of their enterprise risk management programs. We also support risk professionals and executives in leveraging ERM information for better decision-making across government. As many of you know, prior to joining Deloitte, I spent 22 years of my career in federal service as the Chief Risk Officer for the Office of Federal Student Aid and a Senior Advisor to the Office of Management and Budget. I've also been a long-standing advocate and member of AFERM. As a founding member, a former Vice President at Large, I currently am the Corporate Advisory Council Chair, and I'm a former recipient of one of the awards that we'll be presenting today. First, I want to thank the AFERM board and its members, the AGA, the Summit Committee, and all who helped put this event together. Even as each and every one of us consider ourselves risk professionals and experts, we couldn't have imagined the circumstances in which we'd be convening here this year. I want to commend the Summit Committee and its ability to be agile and quickly pivot to bring us this summit in a virtual format. I also want to thank so many of you for participating in the AFERM Awards by nominating individuals in your network. I'm happy to announce that the number of nominations this year was a record high, so thank you for your continued support of this program. As we convene in this virtual format, I am so proud to represent Deloitte in this important and inspiring ceremony that asks each of us to pause and recognize the outstanding service and accomplishments of risk management professionals, colleagues, and friends who've continued to advance federal ERM at all levels of their careers. In his debut book, A Hand to Guide Me, Denzel Washington reflects on the topic around serving others, stating, "At the end of the day, it's not about what you have or even what you've accomplished. It's about who you've lifted up, who you've made better. It's about what you've given back." Each of the individuals that we will recognize today have given back so much. What's so special about each and every one of them, beyond their impressive accomplishments, is that they, as Denzel Washington reminds us, have made an even greater impact on their colleagues and the world around them through their commitment to the public missions that they serve and the overall advancement and use of ERM as a key business process that is helping to make government work better. Their commitment to advancing ERM could not be timelier than it is today. The COVID-19 pandemic illustrates the importance of a disciplined and innovative risk management approach. We continue to see leaders develop impactful and sustainable ways to integrate ERM into other management practices like strategic planning, fraud prevention, and to support improved program outcomes. And as we move to November, we find that no matter what the outcome of the election, we're seeing the original vision of federal ERM coming true, to serve as a spotlight on the federal government's biggest risks and how these risks are being managed and mitigated. As we move to this virtual ceremony, we'll share the name and criteria for each award, and then continue in the tradition that we started last year, where we not only unveil the award recipient, but we also have the award nominator or a board member say a few words about the recipient and why they were selected. And finally, I'm pleased to announce the creation of 2 new scholarship opportunities that will continue to support the training and development of our enterprise risk management professionals at various stages in their careers. The first is the RIM CRMP Fed Scholarship. The RIM CRMP Fed is a credential that recognizes the achievement of a validated risk management competency for effective risk management professionals in the federal government. The recipient of this scholarship will have the opportunity to take both the RIM CRMP Fed exam and training. The second is the George Mason Chief Risk Officer Program Scholarship in memory of Jeannie Spencer. The CRO program designed by George Mason is to support an individual with the skills needed to move into a CRO or similar C-suite position, or it will help an existing CRO be more effective. The recipient of this scholarship will have the opportunity to participate in the 4-month program where they will sharpen their skills and expand their professional network. In closing, I just want to say that the future of ERM is bright because of each of these recipients and you. I hope that next year we will be able to come together again in person to celebrate our continued progress. I must admit that I'm a little bit sad that the individuals who are being recognized today won't have the opportunity to walk across the stage and hear a loud and warm applause from the audience. I do hope each of you will send them a personal email or note congratulating them on their success. So now, thank you, and on to the award ceremony.
Hello and welcome to AFERM's 2020 award ceremony. As Cynthia mentioned, this is the 6th year that AFERM, in partnership with our award sponsor Deloitte, has recognized ERM professionals. As you know, the intent of our annual awards is to recognize individuals for their significant and lasting contributions to enterprise risk management across the federal government. Unfortunately, we're not able to conduct the ceremony in person this year. However, we are able to extend our recognition to these individuals in this virtual ceremony. And I'd like to thank our Summit Planning Committee and to Deloitte for making this possible. This year, we're recognizing professionals across 3 areas. First is our ERM Leader of the Year. This award honors current federal leaders that have demonstrated outstanding and sustained leadership while making exceptional contributions to advancing the enterprise risk management discipline within the federal sector. This year, we have selected 2 individuals to receive that Leader of the Year award. Our next award is the ERM Professional of the Year. This award honors current federal professionals who have demonstrated exceptional initiative, professional development, achievement, and leadership potential early in their careers. And finally, our ERM Volunteer of the Year. This award honors those professionals committed to the advancement of enterprise risk management within the federal government through their service to AFERM, a 100% volunteer-run organization. Providing their time and effort allows AFERM and its members to achieve all that we do and benefits the ERM community with their shared knowledge and skills. This year, we have also selected 2 individuals to be recognized as ERM Volunteers of the Year. On behalf of the entire Board of Directors, I'd like to congratulate all of our 2020 award winners. Thanks to each of you for the positive impact that you have made during the prior year on advancing the ERM profession and enhancing the value that enterprise risk management provides to federal agencies. Thank you.
Ever since Meredith and I co-chaired the 2019 summit together, I've been a great admirer of hers. She manages to be extremely organized, skilled at communication, and effective interactions, all while making it seem effortless. When Meredith agreed to take on this year's summit as the chair, I think we all realized how lucky we were to have someone with experience and proven success to do it all over again. Little did any of us know that the summit would look very different this year. However, not surprisingly, Meredith has led the effort to bring together her almost all volunteer team in a totally new environment and still produce a great event. I know firsthand the countless hours of meetings, emails, preparation, and decisions that go into making the summit happen. And so, with a full understanding for the sacrifices she has made, I want to extend my personal thanks to Meredith for being this year's summit chair and for volunteering so much of her own time and effort to make this event happen for all of us. Meredith, congratulations on your award for AFERM Volunteer of the Year.
Hi, I'm really thrilled to be able to highlight Ed Howe's contributions to AFERM, and am very pleased that he's been selected to receive the Volunteer of the Year award. Ed has been the backbone to AFERM for several years, serving in an instrumental capacity for the organization. I became fully aware of all that Ed does for ERM during my tenure last year as president. Ed was completing his term as vice president, and whenever I needed help involving anything to do with our operations, Ed was the go-to guy. Whether it involved the logistics behind event registrations, understanding how we handled office emails and communications, or figuring out our technology, Ed has always been able to assist. AFERM is so lucky that when Ed's term as vice president concluded, that he agreed to continue his involvement, serving as chair of the newly established Infrastructure and Technology Committee. In this role, Ed oversaw important progress on AFERM's technology platforms, migrating us to Microsoft Office and to QuickBooks. He also guided the board in the area of privacy. Having arranged for a privacy assessment last year, Ed worked this year to drive the development of a privacy policy and the provision of privacy training for the board, key areas that AFERM needs to be on top of. I know that Ed has committed countless hours to helping AFERM, and he has had such a positive impact on our organization, contributing to its success and working to ensure its continued strength. AFERM wouldn't be where it is today without Ed, and for that, he's most deserving of this recognition. Congratulations, Ed.
Andy, congratulations on being named the AFERM Professional of the Year for your outstanding accomplishments in building our Enterprise Risk and Strategy program at the Farm Production and Conservation Mission Area. We're in the first year of implementing our ERS program, and Andy has led its design and very successful rollout. Looking back at the past year, it's pretty amazing to see all that Andy has accomplished. Andy's leadership was critically important in developing the concept of our program, which integrates ERM with strategy and planning activities across the mission area, and also in getting the support and buy-in of senior leadership. Here's a brief rundown of some of the most significant accomplishments, none of which would have been possible without Andy's leadership and vision. We established the Enterprise Risk and Strategy Committee to provide a governance structure, developed a suite of communication and training materials to increase risk awareness and knowledge across our organization. We built an ERM dashboard so we can monitor risk, designed the Enterprise Risk Survey for leadership to identify the top risk across the organization, established risk champions in each of our 4 agencies, and created our first risk profile. In addition to each of these things, Andy was a key member of the team that established USDA's ERM process and USDA risk profile. So congratulations again, Andy. This award is well deserved, and thank you for your commitment to excellence and moving our mission forward.
Curtis, Congratulations on being selected as the AFERM Leader of the Year. Your work embodies the 3 pillars of excellence considered for this award: leadership, innovation, and achievement. I've known Curtis for several years, having had a chance to work together as co-chairs of the breakout panels at the AFERM Summit, at conferences talking about data-driven decision-making, as tag team partners on podcasts, and sharing lessons learned to build out our respective ERM programs. Curtis is the architect of the Capitol's first risk management officer. He's been instrumental in leading the agency toward achieving a risk-aware culture. Having worked in the legislative branch, this is quite the achievement. He helped establish the AOC's ERM program in 2018, and over the past few years, he's focused on enhancing the program and increasing its maturity level. In everything that he does, Curtis brings his passion for risk-informed, data-driven decision-making. Curtis is always striving to be innovative. He's designed and implemented his agency's customized risk register and developed an automated risk survey in order to conduct the annual enterprise risk assessment. Integrating that data with visualizations and insights, he has had a key advance in improving buy-in from senior leadership. Curtis is a true professional and a great colleague who has made a huge positive impact at his home agency as well as across the federal ERM community. Curtis is not afraid of thinking outside the box to work on ERM problems. As a great communicator and a team player, Curtis is always willing to share his insights and provide helpful feedback. Congratulations, buddy. This award is well deserved.
Hi, Marianne. On behalf of all your friends and colleagues at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, I am so pleased to be able to congratulate you on your selection as AFERM's ERM Leader of the Year. As you know, candidates for this award are considered carefully along the dimensions of leadership, achievement, and innovation, and I've had a front row seat over the last 12 months to see the contributions you've made in each of those dimensions. In terms of leadership, it starts here with your willingness to co-chair this summit, as well as your chairing the small agency community of practice, and serving on OMB's Executive Steering Committee to help shape the future direction of this field. In terms of achievement, we've made tremendous strides under your leadership, maturing the Bureau's ERM program against the maturity model that you yourself designed. And in terms of innovation, we've had a big year implementing a risk-based policy prioritization process, the first of its kind at the Bureau, that helps to set the policy priorities of the Bureau in alignment with risks that we see in the marketplace, as well as those entities that we regulate. On behalf of all of us, I am so thrilled you've been selected for this award and can't think of a more deserving person. Congratulations.
Well, congratulations, Meredith.
Thank you, Kia. I thank you. Congratulations to all the award recipients. I'm just all choked up. I'm honored and so humbled to be part of this distinguished group of ERM leaders. Thank you to the AFERM Board of Directors, to my colleagues, and to Deloitte to acknowledge the award recipients' accomplishments.
Yeah, I think it's the speaker on your device. It might be on.
I think we're good. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So please don't leave the meeting yet. I'm going to give you some important instructions to move on to our breakout sessions this afternoon. So here are the steps before leaving the meeting. Don't close out of the webinar yet, but first, after we adjourn, you will. And then you'll go to AFERM's online agenda and click on the session title that you wish to attend. You'll be directed to the breakout room in GoToMeeting, and your next session begins at 1 p.m. And in order, if you're collecting or needing to receive CPE credits, you can't jump between sessions. So you have to commit to your session, and partial credit won't be provided. So please continue to keep track and log your attendance by writing down in your notes the CPE credits. If you don't need to obtain CPE credits, then you are allowed to move back and forth between the sessions if you choose. But remember, please please ensure that your phone is muted. Otherwise, we will get some feedback. So with that, your next session begins at 1 p.m. So go grab some lunch, take a break, and join us back then. Enjoy and thank you. And now you can click leave the meeting. Thank you all so much for a great morning.